Good evening and welcome to the Westborough Select Board meeting called here on Tuesday, September 13th. Being 5:05, slightly beyond our agenda calling time of 5 o'clock, I am convening the meeting. I would ask that all those that are able, if they don't mind rising and joining me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Just wanted to note with our agenda tonight that this meeting, as noted on the agenda, is being recorded and also live streamed by Westborough TV. And first thing on our agenda this evening is open forum. I know we have one item for open forum. Christy.
So we wanted to introduce Owen Page, who is our new management analyst / communications assistant. Owen started with us in our office on Monday. As the board remembers, we created this position after the retirement of one of our administrative assistants, and we evaluated the responsibilities, and we came up with this position, which we think is going to be great in terms of projects and doing some more robust communications throughout the town. So I just wanted to let Owen introduce himself.
Welcome, Owen. You're on the big stage now.
Yeah, exactly. Good evening. I just wanted to introduce myself. I spent the past 3 years as a professional writer, working as a newspaper reporter, editor in a small town in California. Built up a lot of my skills there, working closely with local government officials, working closely with municipal officials, and a lot of environmental work as well. Very excited to join the team here. I've had a great introduction so far, and I'm really, really excited to keep moving forward and building this role out.
Great.
Thank you.
Terrific. Welcome. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, next on our agenda is town manager's report. Christy.
So the fall town meeting, we sent out the second version of the warrant on Sunday, and we'll have a version 3 after tonight's meeting, because we know there's a couple more items that will be added to it. The warrant will close on the 27th. The board will hear from some departments tonight, and then you'll hear from the Town Sale Committee, Wastewater Treatment Plant Board, and the Economic Development Coordinator on the 27th. Several employees, departments, and committees attended the Westborough for Life event on Sunday, September 11th. So inclusive of that was Youth and Family Services, Sustainable Westborough, the Council on Aging. And then we had a town table for civic engagement, which was staffed by myself, Wendy Mickle, Assistant Town Manager Kim Foster, and we also had Officer Joe Sabati. So we were able to talk to people about different services that were provided in town. And I think we were pretty popular. We had Board of Health gave us some things to pass out, like COVID tests and thermometers. The senior needs assessment is well underway. Working with UMass Boston's Gerontology Institute. One of the major components of the project is a survey that will be distributed by mail in late October to all residents age 55 and older. We just introduced Owen, who started on the 12th. And then I attended a meeting at the Cultural Council on September 7th to discuss the public arts policy. So they're still working through some process questions before it comes to you in final form. For community development, we've achieved one of the local rapid recovery program goals, which was the electronic business directory. So the initial launch had approximately 175 businesses sign up. We also have progress with some commercial projects on Otis Street. So 64 Otis is completing the shell of the building by the end of the month. The building at 54 Otis should be starting foundation work within a week. And then they've received a building permit for 66 Otis, which is the new home for Cold Harbor.
Perfect. That answers a question.
Yes. The fire department on September 6th had 5 firefighters from Westborough were invited to a ceremony at the Southborough Fire Department. At the ceremony, the members were awarded letters of merit for their actions at a building fire on Sears Road in Southborough on August 5th. The fire department was awarded a state 911 grant of $77,476 for the Public Safety Communication Center, and Emergency Management is co-hosting a tabletop exercise on October 4th in Westborough at the Emergency Operations Center with Shrewsbury, Northborough, and Southborough. The health department, they're seeing a slow incline in COVID-19 cases through wastewater tracking. Through a grant, the public health nurse and public health director will be completing a training of trainers program on drug overdose and Narcan. And then there are now 347 cases of monkeypox in Massachusetts, which is an increase from 317 in the last week. The Mass Department of Public Health has reported the first human case of West Nile virus in Massachusetts this year on August 25th, so we encourage residents to take appropriate measures to protect themselves. The police department is in the process of putting 3 officers in the academy. This will be the first time in over 15 years that we've placed someone in the academy. We're also hiring 1 lateral transfer from the Chicopee Police Department. The chief was nominated and unanimously voted as second vice chair for the Central Region Homeland Security Advisory Council. And the Public Works Department, they're doing an analysis with establishing a stormwater utility fund, and that's progressing, so they'll come to a future future select board meeting to present. The DPW participated in an infrastructure planning meeting hosted by CMRPC. Patrick and I were also there. Later this month, the DPW will conduct its annual winter operations preparations, during which they'll review snow plow operations and inspect their equipment. And then despite the rain, the central region remains at critical drought status per the state's drought management task force. So residents are encouraged to participate in water conservation in all activities. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you. Show it's 5:12. A hearing set for 5:15, so I don't want to. So let's, we'll wait a couple minutes for that. Let's looking at stuff on the agenda. Just a couple of items as we go through this. The item scheduled for 8:30 tonight, the Verizon contract presentation and approval from the Cable TV Advisory Committee. We're going to pass over that this evening and take that up at our next meeting per their request. And why don't we move to
Do the appointments?
yeah, but why don't we do the appointments for 3 student liaisons to the Cultural Council, as was provided in our package, and I'd entertain a motion for that.
Be happy to make those appointments. Great letters by the applicants. So this is an appointment to move to appoint Zanab Anwar, Chase Crandall, and Vishnavi Videla as student liaisons to the Westborough Cultural Council for a term to expire June 30, 2023.
I will second that motion.
Okay, and because we're in meeting with, should have noted that Select Board Member Edinburgh is participating remotely. I will go to a roll call vote. So, Alan? Oops, you're on mute there.
Edinburgh, yes. Okay. Welch, yes.
Johnson, yes.
Marshall, yes.
So that's voted 4-0, 4 being present. Thank you for that. I will just hit on item 11 on our agenda as well. So, as the board is aware, we did receive a request for executive session minutes for 2020, 2021, and 2022. Those minutes were redacted, as is policy for those items that were dealing with collective bargaining or still open items in front of the board. So that's been done, and we have made those available to the requester. And our requirement is that we must announce that at a subsequent meeting. So that is the announcement tonight, that we have received that request. We have redacted those minutes, and we've made them available and delivered those at this time. Christy, anything further on that? Okay. Perfect. Okay, now being 5:15, the scheduled time for a hearing on the Class 2 dealer's license hearing for the Westborough Mobile Station at 24 East Main Street. Could I ask for a motion to open this hearing? I believe we have to open it, right?
It's not a public hearing, so.
It should be opened with a motion.
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing for mobile station at 24 East Main Street in regards to the Class 2 dealer's license.
Second the motion. Marshall?
Okay, Alan, there's a vote.
Good evening. My name is,
Oops, sorry, 1 second, sorry.
That's okay.
Yep, just have to vote for it.
Edinburgh, yes. Welch, yes.
Johnson, yes.
Marshall, yes.
Okay, so public hearing's open. Sorry about that.
sorry.
Yep.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Sparks. I'm an associate attorney at Myrick O'Connell, and I was retained about 2 hours ago to represent Mr. Azar here. So I just wanted to introduce myself. It's my understanding that through counsel, Attorney Eddie, who is also here, that he requested a continuance but was informed by town council that he should come here in person to do so. And so that is why I am here. Respectfully, I would request a brief continuance so I can get up to speed on the matter. I'm generally familiar with the issues, and given that there is some history here with my client, having a little bit of time to be able to get up to speed on those issues would be much appreciated.
Great, thank you. And just for your notice as well, we have our attorney here, Jeff Blake, from KP Law. We understood that there was the request for the continuance, and appreciate you being here and requesting that. I guess one thing I would ask is, as of right now, with the 30-day suspension that was put in place, that is set to expire, I believe, tomorrow. I guess we would ask whether Mr. Azar would be willing to voluntarily surrender that license until we continue the hearing, if that would be acceptable to him at this point in time.
It would be. We have discussed that, and he would be more than willing to do that.
Okay, that'd be great. One final thing, too, is it is our understanding that we did, at our request, Mr. Azar did turn in materials, but our understanding is that those may be incomplete in terms of maybe the dealer book, and if that additional...
I do have the book right here. I'm happy to pass it around. I haven't looked at it myself yet, but I'm happy to let the select board look at it. I would just ask that I be able to take it so I can make a copy. This is the only one that he has, and I have not had a chance to look at it, but I'm happy to present it tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you noted, my name is Jeff Blake. I'm here from KP Law. In my opinion, I don't know what you could do to pass it around and look at
we're
it.
not-
So if she is willing to provide you with the book 2 days, 3, by the end of the
Whatever you
week.
need to, yeah.
Absolutely, tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, and we
That's-
just need it turned into this town manager's office here. And we don't need to look
Absolutely.
at it tonight.
Okay, we can
Okay.
make that happen.
Okay. And in terms of timing, our next scheduled meeting would be 2 weeks from tonight, which is the 27th. Is that, if we continue to that date, is that okay?
That date is fine for us. I will note that on the 28th, there is a hearing before the RMV on, it's my understanding that there's a hearing before the RMV on this same issue. I don't know if the board would prefer to wait till the next meeting so that we can let you know the result of that hearing. But we're happy to come on the
Okay.
27th.
I think that'd be fine with us.
That's your call.
Yeah, I think that'd be fine with us if that's the request on that side. So our next meeting after that would be the 2nd.
October 11th.
Okay.
Is that enough time, or?
So what's the impact of the license suspension until that point?
That continues.
Okay.
That was the request I had, and it sounds like
Okay.
the willingness is there to continue voluntarily, that, I think that with the request for the continuance at our advice of council, we don't think that we should hold the hearing to
Yep.
do any action.
I
at this
just want to
point,
make
so-
sure with the extension, given
Yep.
the timing of the RMV meeting on the 28th, and then our meeting being the next meeting being before, that day before, I think it is prudent to wait until the meeting on the 28th. But I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same calendar with the same kind of game plan.
Okay,
We are. Thank you.
perfect. So I would look for a motion then to continue this Class 2 dealer's license hearing until October 8th, you said?
11th,
Oh, sorry, October 11th, at
6:15. 6:15.
6:15. Does that work? 6:15 work
Yes.
for October 11th?
Perfect.
Okay,
Do you need a
Alright.
motion for that?
yes.
Okay, I'll do it. I'll move to extend the hearing of mobile station.
Continue, yeah.
Excuse me, continue the hearing of mobile station at 24 East Main Street for the Class 2 dealer's license to October 11th at 6:15 PM.
Second.
Okay.
Marshall seconds.
Any
Question?
comments? Questions?
Yes, I do. Should the motion also reflect that we're continuing the suspension until that time as well?
I think what I asked was for the voluntary suspension, and that's been agreed to, so we're not asking, we're not continuing the suspension. I'll look into our attorney on this one as well, but it's not the board, in essence, continue. We asked for the voluntary.
That is correct. You aren't
Granted
continuing.
to us, yep.
It's a voluntary surrender by the license holder, so it shouldn't be part of your motion.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, any other questions? Okay, roll call vote. Allen?
Edinburgh, yes?
Welch, yes?
Johnson, yes?
Marshall, yes.
Great, so that passes. Continued. Thank you very much for
you.
being here. Look forward to seeing you on the 11th.
Thanks.
Jeff, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Do you need me to stay for anything, or are you guys good?
I think we're good, right? Christie?
We're good. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you
Great.
for being here.
I'm glad you enjoyed Westborough.
I may or may not be back on the 11th.
Okay.
If Brian's available, I am also now available because of the 11th, but one of us will certainly be here
Awesome.
in
Thank you.
person.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. It was good meeting everyone.
Okay, can I have a motion to close the Class 2 dealer's license hearing?
So moved?
Seconded?
Second that?
Alan seconded. Roll call vote. Alan?
Edinburgh, yes?
Welch, yes?
Johnson, yes?
Marshall, yes.
Okay, the hearing's closed 4-0. Thank you on that.
So Chris has said that he can come, so he's, I think, on his way.
Okay,
But if you want to start by talking about,
why don't we go, we could do the meeting, or should we wait for Sean for those, or do 4 of us? So yeah, why don't we hit those, and then do you want to go to 0 Ruggles Street then, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to, we have, oops, meeting minute approvals, and thank you, Sealer, and I think there's been updated here, but August 9th, August 23rd, September 6th minutes for approval. So I'd entertain a motion. We can do them together if folks want, or individually, whatever is the preference of the person making the motion.
Ian, can I ask a quick question? I had
Sure.
sent some comments to Sela just before the meeting, a couple hours earlier, on the August 23rd minutes, that there were some changes that were needed.
she sent the updated.
Okay, I haven't had a chance to read them, but if the rest of the board has read them as updated since
I
this
didn't know what you notes were, but
afternoon.
they were definitely updated and resent, so
Okay.
I looked at those.
Okay, then I'll support whatever the majority wants here. I just haven't read them since they've been updated, so.
Okay. Were they updated towards the comments you received, is what I'm assuming?
Yeah, I had put up the wrong file completely. I put up my draft minutes.
Yep,
instead of-
that's what I assumed. There were just
Okay.
some components missing. It
Okay.
wasn't that they were incorrect, they were just not complete.
Okay. Did others have a chance to review?
Yep.
Yes, okay, so I would ask for a motion.
I guess I'm the slacker, so.
Not at all.
Not like we don't have other stuff to do.
Noted, put that in the minutes.
Yes, put that in the minutes, it's a self-comment. Is there a motion?
So I'll move to approve the August 9th, August 23rd, and September 6th minutes.
Is there a second?
Alan, you're on mute. Sorry.
Seconded?
Okay, moved and seconded. Any other comments or corrections? Okay, if not, all those in favor, roll call vote. Alan?
Edinburgh, yes.
Welch, yes.
Johnson, yes.
Marshall, yes.
Okay, 4-0, 4 being present. Chris was quick. He's like the snap of his fingers. So again, we have some time before our tax classification public forum at 6 o'clock. So on our agenda, item 5 was to review some October town meeting warrant articles. So at this point, I'll ask Chris if he is ready to come forward and present the DPW warrant articles. And Christie, anything you want to introduce before, or as Chris walks up?
I would just say that we've reviewed the warrant, version 1 of the warrant at your last meeting, and there were some departments that you would request to come before you. So Chris will review all of the DPW warrant articles and speak to any that might be on version 3. And then we'll hear from Chief Purcell, Superintendent Bach, and then also the library later in the meeting.
Welcome.
Good evening.
Thanks for helping us fill our schedule earlier.
Give me just 1 second and get this up.
Is there a significant change? That's what it says. You just said 3.
Can you guys see it, or do you have to turn around to see it?
No, we see it right in front of
Oh,
us.
okay.
Yeah. We have it
Okay.
on the
Right, so
TV in
we're
front of
current.
us here. So.
Present. Okay, all right,
And Alan, you're able to see it?
okay.
Yep, I can see it.
Okay. I was reading your lips, so I got it.
All right. Good evening, Chris Pant, Director of Public Works. So we have a few articles to go over. I'm going to just flip through the warrant, and the ones that I need to present on or whatever, I'll say that. But the first one is Article 2, which is the appropriation of Commonwealth Transportation Infrastructure Fund. That is kind of a routine thing. It's money we get from the state, and we just need the town to appropriate it so we can spend it.
Yep. And for the public, we went through this before, but this is the money that we receive derived from taxes on Lyft, Uber, other ride-sharing
right.
services.
Yep. Article 4 is related to a Public Works budget adjustment, so I will speak to that on a slide. Across the top is the request, so we're requesting $111,000 from the general budget, $31,000 for the water budget, and $10,000 for the sewer budget. For the general budget, that would be $76,000 for fuel, and then the remaining balance, $35,000 for building maintenance requirements we've had recently. And then for the water plant, $15,000 for fuel, and then $16,000 is related to a plant contract adjustment. So I'll talk through those briefly. So the fuel, it was a deliberate decision back in preparation for the current year's budget, so January, February, March timeframe, to not adjust our fuel line item, even though we knew or had seen at the time prices increase. We wanted to wait till the fiscal year started, get an assessment, see where things played out, and then, if necessary, make an adjustment at the October town meeting. And that was kind of the consensus on the way to approach it. So that table there just gives a representation. So July of 21, we paid $16,000-ish for a month for fuel, and in July 22 we paid $29,000, and those are the prices. The gallons used is actually kind of, interestingly, it's almost exactly the same. We're 100 gallons less this year than we were last year, so pretty much comparing apples to apples. And so all we did is take the difference between those two numbers, which is about $12,000, multiplied it by 6, and came up with the $76,000. And we multiplied by 6 because a portion of the year we do take money from the snow budget to pay for fuel as it relates to plowing operations. And so we felt the right number, and didn't obviously want to ask for a crazy amount, but we think the 76 would cover it for the remainder of the year. I know you know this, but for anybody listening, and we could always not make this adjustment, but then potentially have to go back to the town later for a reserve funds transfer or some other mechanism. We just felt it was appropriate to recognize the requirement now and ask for it, and if we don't spend it, great, but that's what we're asking for. For the building maintenance, we We have line items for buildings, those line items, and I can get into more detail if anybody wants to, but basically, a significant portion of the line item we have for a building is already encumbered, meaning it's a service agreement for elevator inspections, HVAC, cleaning. So we have very little in terms of discretionary spending for any major items that come up. So in the case of the recent circumstance in the town hall, this elevator needed to be repaired at a cost of $19,000, and then we had our HVAC in our garage building needed repaired as well, and that was $16,000. So that's what comes up to be $35,000. So those things are in motion. We're doing them because they need to be done, and we're paying for them out of our budget. But basically, we're taking money from somewhere else to pay for it, and so I'm recommending, and I think we should, basically reimburse ourselves so we don't have to steal that money from somewhere else and not do something else. Underwater, similar for the fuel, and then the plant contract. So as you all know, we have a contract operator who runs the plant. Every year for as long as we've had the contract, we've had a CPI adjustment. We anticipate what we think is going to be the adjustment. This year we went really high. I mean, 3 times higher than we typically do. Usually we go about 2%. The average for the last 15 years has been about 1.89%. So we typically do 2. This year we did 6. It came out at 7.2. So that 16,000 is to cover that delta between those for the CPI. And then the sewer is strictly for fuel adjustment.
Great. Any questions?
Yeah, Chris, can you just explain a little bit more about the plant contract and what that additional overage is? I don't quite understand.
So we had last year was the first year of a new contract. We had a set price that we agreed to that was in the proposal. And then part of the contract includes I'm not super smart on all these indexes and everything, but the point, it's basically a cost of living adjustment to the contract. And it can go down as well. I mean, it could benefit us. But that number is given to us every year, and it comes out to a percentage of the contract, and that we increase the contract based on that number.
Okay. So it's some standard index on which we agreed to, it's in the contract, and it's adjusted accordingly.
Correct. I think it's a U.S. labor, whatever,
Yeah.
department CPI, and I think, isn't it on a certain month or something that it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the end of pretty much at the end of the year is when we do it.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't always, it never aligns with our normal budget process.
Sure.
We find about it later.
Okay. No,
So-
appreciate the clarification. Thanks.
Ian, I just had one question. So thank you, Chris. This is great information. On the fuel piece, I'm just curious. They're forecasting the fuel to decrease in cost coming forward. If that happens, right? If the fuel prices continue to drop, I should know this. Where does the funds go to if we don't use all of the funds that we've allocated here?
Well, before I answer that, I will say that just to clarify, this is fuel for the entire town. It's not just DPW. So it's police, fire, and then under DPW, we account for health, rec, everybody else that has a vehicle that they use. So it comes to our budget. We pay monthly the bill for gas, diesel. At the end of the year, if the money's not spent, just like any other money we don't spend, it through a series of steps that Leah takes, it eventually ends up in our free cash
Free
for the
cash.
town.
Okay. Thank you. I should know that. I just wanted to make sure.
You did know that. You were just testing Chris, and you passed.
I just need a refresher sometimes. So, thank you.
Perfect. Alan, any questions or?
No, I'm good. I appreciate the presentation.
All right, next one is Article 7, which is a catch basin cleaner attachment. You may recall at the March town meeting, we're replacing 2 trucks. So the 2 trucks pictured on the left are going away. At least that's the intent, is those 2 trucks would go away. We would replace them with 1 truck pictured on the right. So that truck on the right, which is not a truck we own, but it's just a representation, It'd be that truck plus those three things shown there. So on the top, that's the actual basin cleaner, and then bottom left is a salt spreader, and bottom right is a dump body. So those three things give us one truck. We go from two trucks to one truck. We paid, we're paying a lot of money, but we're saving money in terms of not buying two separate trucks, which would be more money, and we're saving down in the future in terms of costs for maintenance. So at the March town meeting, we recognized we didn't have enough money to fund all of those attachments. So we deferred the catch basin cleaner or attachment and recommended that be pushed to the October town meeting, which is where it is now and what we're presenting tonight.
And just for folks watching, so that'd be a request for transfer from free cash, and the amount's $168,000.
Yes.
And this did go through capital expenditures, just exactly as you said, Chris. It was just when the numbers came in, just in front of town meeting, the decision was made not to try to change something then, but to put it on hold. And I think we all remember that, Chris coming to us with that discussion and that agreement. So, just one other question. I'm assuming by what you said that the new truck and the two attachments we don't have yet at this point, they're on order, or is that?
We do not have them. They are on order, yes.
So like everything else, we're waiting?
We maybe in a year and a half or so, we'll see them.
Yeah.
But yes, they are on order.
It's crazy. Yeah. Sorry.
No, thank you. I just will say I'm very supportive of this, having attended the CMRPC infrastructure meeting the other day. I got to learn firsthand a lot of the challenges in not only our community but the communities around us, and I see that this type of these type of machinery is really required, because it really sounds like the towns in the area, including Westborough, really have a lot of work cut out for themselves to deal with some of these issues around catchment and catch basins and whatnot, to prevent stormwater runoff and all of those things. So I'm very supportive of it, and I thank you, Chris, for bringing this forward.
Any other questions on this one? Okay, Chris, next.
All right, next one is Article 8/9, which is, Article 8, which is water system improvements. I was just checking the article to see, it doesn't necessarily say where it comes from. Did we figure that out?
Right, so.
I just noticed that.
So we combined in version 2 the two articles, and then we just said from available funds.
Okay.
So that we can put in the motion.
Got it.
So this was the one we talked about last time, where there was the potential for pulling from the mitigation stabilization account or from retained earnings. And so so Leah had recommended at the meeting that we combine them and just say available funds, and then we'll specify in the motion.
Sorry, I just noticed that for some reason just now.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a request for funding, $550,000 to pay for engineering design services to design a treatment system for PFAS at our Oak Street treatment plant. So most people realize we have a treatment plant off of Smith Valley Parkway, but we actually have a second treatment plant at the DPW yard, which receives water from two different wells. One of those wells was tested all of our wells were tested for PFAS. One came back higher than the allowable limit per the DEP. So as you can see by the timeline there, that happened in December of 2020. We immediately submitted for a grant, received it. The grant did an assessment to figure out what our options are for addressing the issue. Lots of conversations with the Department of Environmental Protection. Ultimately led to a selection of a design or a conceptual design that gave us a cost. That cost is now identified as $550,000, which will help us design the treatment technique we're going to use. So typically this would go through the capital process, but we're kind of jumping that a little bit by bringing it to October town meeting for really two reasons. One is because since December of 2020, we've had two wells shut off and we want to get them back on. Thankfully, we've been able to operate fine without them, but they're sources of water that we want to be able to use if we need to. So the sooner we can get this process going, the better. And two, the construction of the treatment plant, or the addition to the treatment plant, is about a $6 million project, but there's funding that's available through the state revolving fund that we've already applied for, but the funding will not pay for the design. So we've started the process to get some construction funding or some assistance with construction funding, and we'll find out where we stand with that at the beginning of next year. But if we can demonstrate we've got the design complete and we are more competitive, and basically the ball is moving in the right direction towards getting this done. So it's not determined yet how much assistance we would get, but it's potentially a 0% loan and or principal forgiveness, and that amount of forgiveness is dependent upon how many applications they get based on the money they have available to give out. But we feel pretty confident that we're going to get something which would make it worth doing this now so we can take advantage of that opportunity next year.
Great. I would just comment on that for folks probably remember on the board. This is one that we've talked about. A lot of work. It's all over the country, but definitely in the state. So I think this is absolutely the smart way to do it, to try to accelerate this and get in front of others, because I know that there are other communities dealing with a problem that are not as far along the path as us, and hopefully that puts us in, a better place for assistance through the SRF. So appreciate you doing that. I'm supportive of it. You hate doing these things, but it's our drinking water. It's important for us and something we need to do. So, Shelby.
Yeah, I would just echo your comments. Ian, Patrick, and I attended a forum a couple months ago where we heard a legislative update from, I apologize, I don't recall the representative that gave it, but there's no question that a lot of communities are going to be lining up for this. So the sooner we're in, the better. And appreciate all the work that you and your team have done to get us there. So.
And just to reiterate what Christy said earlier, so that there's the potential that this money that we're asking for may not actually come out of our own budget. It could come from some other source. So that's also good news, and obviously we'll do that if we have that opportunity.
That's the pace too. It's whichever way it comes, it's a transfer, whether it's retained earnings,
Yes.
whether it's potentially for mitigation funds, but it's not a impact on resident tax bills
Ideally, yeah.
at this point
Yes.
with the transfer. Yep.
It comes down to the timing, but yeah.
Yep. Other questions or comments? So, okay.
There's one other that mentions us, Article 9, that's a rescind of borrowing authorization. So we received town meeting approval to borrow some money in March for a chlorine booster station, but that project's now being funded through ARPA, so we don't need that. We don't believe we need that money, and so opportunity to give it back. And then we do have an additional article that we would like to, you'll see in next version of the warrant. So nationally, through the EPA, there's a requirement for every community to inventory all of their water service lines, so the line that goes from the main pipe in the road to your house or to your business, to investigate whether that's lead or not, and if it's lead, then there's a process that you then have to do to remove it. So everybody's required to do this lead service line inventory. You have to be complete by October of 2024, but similar to the PFAS, there's money available now that you can apply for and basically get the project completely reimbursed. So we would work this through a consultant, and our estimate is about $100,000, or it is $100,000. So in order for us to apply for this through the SRF program, the town has to appropriate the money, even though we're never really going to spend that money because we're going to get it back. But it's I can't really explain it because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but the point is that we have to do this in order to apply for this money. But we're going to get $100,000, someone else is going to give it to us, we're going to complete this inventory and, move on to whatever the next steps are. We were trying to avoid having to do that part and looking for opportunities not to, but turns out we don't have that opportunity to not do it, so that's why it's a late add to the warrant.
Okay, I know Leah's here, so this may be a question for you for that. So it says in here we're going to authorize a borrow, so assuming we would authorize a borrow, but then actually never go out
Right.
to actually borrow, is that how it works? If you don't mind coming forward.
Yes.
Yes.
No, I don't. Oh, that went on. No, I don't mind coming forward. Leah Talbot, Finance Director. So Chris and I have kind of been back and forth, so I can't really answer the question except to say that if what he is saying is correct, I'm not saying he's not correct, then what you said is correct.
Okay.
But I'm just questioning whether or not it's a complete loan forgiveness or just interest forgiveness, because Chris and I are back and forth with the person from the state, so.
Okay.
But-
So still some more to come here, but
More to come, and we will definitely get it ironed out in the next day, so.
if I heard this, though, we're required to do this one way or the other.
Yes.
So the worst-case scenario is we have to pay for it all ourselves.
Right.
But it sounds like that's not the worst case. It sounds like the worst-case scenario is we pay principal, they pay interest, from what you're saying.
More to come.
More to come, honestly. I don't want to speculate.
Okay.
But, I mean, it's $100,000, so if it's interest forgiveness, it's not really a heck of a lot of money.
Yeah. No, and the reason I was asking the question is, typically we would never borrow for $100,000, but it sounds like that's the right
Absolutely,
process to do
Which is
it.
kind of, why we're kind of going back and forth, is it worth it,
Okay.
to do this? But then if it moves on and gives us more money, it is worth it, so.
Yeah,
More to come.
perfect.
Can I, just- oh.
Yep.
So Chris, the $100,000 plus or minus interest, but the $100,000 will actually pay for the service, the whole project to do the inventory, or is that correct?
Yep, so it would pay for the end state would be an inventory of, or a document that identifies anything that we have lead in it, and everything else is inventoried essentially.
Okay,
There's another phase to it with a later completion date, which is if you have something with lead in, you gotta fix
Fix
it.
it,
But
right.
that's
yep,
a ways off for us. And
Okay.
thankfully, we don't think we have a whole lot of it, so,
Yep.
or any, but that's to be determined.
Hopefully it's none.
Yep.
Hopefully that's what we find out.
But the point of bringing it now, I know we still have some details to work out, but we wanted to get it out there because we want to take advantage, if we have to follow this process, we want to do it now rather than wait till March and lose potential opportunity to get some money or loan forgiveness or whatever the end answer is.
Perfect. Other questions, comments?
Chris.
I just wanted to add that, going back to the first, or I guess second article that Chris raised, we've been talking about breaking out the maintenance projects as a separate article to be funded through free cash, so it wouldn't have an impact on the tax rate.
The 35,000?
Yep.
What, just,
So I
what's,
just hit that again?
Because they're repair projects, they're one-time
One-time,
repairs.
okay, got it.
Okay.
So if you look up at his slide, he breaks it out. So that building maintenance is really projects that he's identified, which is the town hall elevator, the DPW garage building, and HVAC repairs. So we've considered pulling that out as a separate article, whereas the other increases are operating expenses, so they would be a raise and appropriate.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
That's great.
Is that it?
Yep, that's it. Thank you.
So I did see a hand raised. It's not really a public forum, but did you have a question on?
Well, when Chris was doing his presentation, he said he had 2 wells offline. And that slide only showed 1 well offline. Do we have to plug in another well that we're gonna have to spend some money on?
Well, I think one well offline for PFAS, correct?
Yep, so there's 2 wells, I turn around, but I want to make sure everybody hears. But there's 2 wells that feed one treatment plant. One of the wells is the PFAS issue, the other well is fine, but based on the mechanics of how we run the system and hydraulics and all that kind of stuff, basically it doesn't make sense to run one by itself, so that's why.
Thanks. Okay,
Thanks.
perfect. Again, thanks for coming in early too. Appreciate that. You get your night back too, so that's good.
That's right.
So Chris was going to talk with us about the zero ruggles, so I don't know if we want to just sort of
Yeah.
briefly start with that, and then you can.
Yep, let's
move
start with
into
that before the
forum.
6 o'clock, so. Perfect. So as folks know, at the last meeting, we had this on the agenda but passed over it. The board has talked about this in executive session, but we do have a final purchase and sale agreement to bring in front of the board at this time. So that's been agreed to, and it'd be, if we would, and feel comfortable that we would vote tonight to approve the, move forward on the purchase and sale agreement, but turn to Christie just for an update.
Sure. So the purchase and sale agreement is for acquisition of land at 0 Ruggles or off Ruggles Street. So it's just about 15.5 acres. And we would, that would be on the warrant. We would be doing this, we would be purchasing it for consideration of $325,000. There is a provision within the purchase and sale agreement under section 13 that if the closing were to go into 2023, so beyond January 1st, 2023, that the town agrees to reimburse the seller for real estate taxes owed on the premises up to $1,000. So we would show that on the warrant as an appropriation for $326,000, understanding that potential cost. The reason that there's some sort of ambiguity around the closing date is that the town has applied for a grant to help fund the purchase. So it's the land grant. Sherry Wittes worked on that for us. I know we mentioned that in a meeting. And the town is eligible for 58% of the appraised value. So if we were to be awarded that, that would offset this cost of the $325,000.
Yeah, and just for clarity there, Chrissy, as part of the agreement here is the seller is willing to wait for us to hear about that grant, as we can't have closed a sale prior to the grant being awarded. So we've asked for kind of a delay in the closing towards the end of the year. We still expect that we will be able to close by the end of the year, but it's really contingent on when we hear. In the past, we heard, for the Zwicker property, we heard in November. So if that holds in this case, we think would very easily be closing prior to the end of the year, and that additional clause in 1,000 would not come into play.
Right. Right, and so that's one of the contingencies within this. Other contingencies are obviously the authorization of town meeting as well as the appropriation, and then it gives, and also our ability to do due diligence on the property. So in the past, we've done a phase 1 report where we have engineering firm go out and inspect the soils, and so we would do that as well.
Ian, if I may.
Yep.
And if I'm correct, Christie, remind me, I think the percentage of the grant was based on the appraised value, not on the sale value. Is that?
Right, that's what I said, yeah.
And again, just maybe you go in there, sorry.
No, go.
Because people will ask, but the proposed funding source that will be in the warrant article.
Right, so we needed to discuss that. We've talked about sale of real estate as being the proposed funding source, as well as what we have done in the past is we've asked Walkup Robinson to convene a meeting to consider whether or not they would pay for half. In the past, we also split it with open space, but there's
No money.
No money in that fund at the moment. So that is not a borrow. It's coming out of available funds. Excuse me.
Yeah, so it's not a taxpayer impact. But I think that the steps here is that we would like to, I think what you're looking for is.
Right. So if the
request
board would like, we would request that Walkup Robinson meet to consider paying 50% of the cost. And obviously 50% would be reduced by the grant if it were to be awarded. We did apply for the grant for the Zwicker property. We did not receive it, but we were given sort of points to consider when we were to apply again, and we feel that this property is actually a better candidate for that grant.
Yep. And you're going to show us the picture on this one, or?
Right.
Just for the public too, I know we've talked about this before, but it's weird calling something 0 Ruggles Street. People want to know where it is, so we can, as you show it, I think we can point out kind of exactly where the property is, because 0 Ruggles Street you'd think would be right down here on Main Street, but it's actually not.
And Ian, you're going to speak to kind of the why? Will you?
What's that?
The why, I mean, why is
Yeah,
it,
and I think
once we have the visual?
Well, with the
Yep,
visual,
okay.
we can
All right,
talk
so-
about too. But as, I think as we're calling up the visual, and you'll see it when it come up here, but this piece of property, oh, Chris, do you want to talk through it?
Sure. So this piece of property abuts the Daypray property, which we purchased 2 years ago. And we see potential for a trail system on that property.
Can you just give an orientation for folks kind of looking at this, like what they're looking at, where Eli Whitney is?
Yeah, so if you look at, I'll
That's
try
okay.
here.
No, just,
So on the map here, if you look at what's labeled, so it's really A, B, and C that are on here. It's that swath of property. It's that little over 15 acres.
Yep.
A, the approach in, you can see a little road that comes off of Breen Road, and then it goes along Valley Brook.
right,
And then from Valley Brook up, Valley Brook intersects then with Mount Pleasant Street,
right.
but then you go up Ruggles Street, so think about going up Ruggles Street Hill to the top of that to point C. You'll see another road coming in. That little piece cut out of C, that's the town's water tower, so that is town property as well as that access road there. So this abuts also a water resource for the town, as well as the adjacent Daypray property.
So, so you can be more specific, but one of the reasons that the board was interested in this property is because of the piece of the property that abuts the water tower. And so if there was future work to be done or need for any additional sort of utility up there, we would, once we purchase the property, what I'm showing you is that we would hold that parcel C, I'm calling it, for general municipal purposes under the care and control of the select board. The purpose of that is because, as you know, that when the land is conveyed to the Conservation Commission, it goes under Article 97, meaning that there's very little you can do with the property, and specifically in terms of constructing anything on it. So just like we did with Daypray, where we held some property for a future parking lot or other sort of complementary use, we would hold, and we actually also did it with Belknap. We held property for a future utility if that was needed. So I'm working with the DPW director. We've identified that sort of parcel C, we're calling it here, to be held under the care and control of the select board just for those purposes. And then parcel B, that middle parcel, would be would go to the Conservation Commission and be held under their control. And that's contiguous to the Daypray property, so it would work with that use. And then parcel A, we're also proposing, or the way that I've drawn it here, that would be under the care and control of the select board as well, for the purpose of some trailhead parking. So we did, I don't know if you want to talk about our meetings with other entities and sort of the value of the property, or.
Yeah, so in this process, we did talk with Conservation, we talked with Planning, we talked with Westborough Community Land Trust, we talked with Sudbury Valley trustees. Part of this was, accessing interest, trail systems, et cetera. Everybody is very interested in the property. We were also, part of it was trying to request help with funding. At this point, nothing there, although some help if we wanted to fundraise and other things there. But I think the working with them, every single one of them to a person thought it was a valuable piece of property for preservation and for trail systems, et cetera. So, and being contiguous to that Daypray property. And all those things, being contiguous to Daypray property, being contiguous to the water resource, are all things that are beneficial to us in our grant application. as well as actually getting denied on our first grant application is a benefit for us on the second grant application. So there's no guarantees, but we feel we have at least a much stronger chance for this grant application as well. The one final piece is we did also receive a letter from, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's Mass Historical Commission, who considers this a property of significant interest related to Jack Swift. Jack Swift, I think. Jack Straw. Sorry, Jack Straw. It was Jack Swift. Jack Straw. And there may be other Native American artifacts and other things on this property. So archaeologically, that this could be a significant site from their perspective, and they basically supported, or I'd say in a way urged the town that this would be a valuable piece of property for the town to retain under its control. So that'll be something as well that we'll share at town meeting, a copy of that letter with folks as well.
So we have to have a plan for town meeting to consider, and so I've been in touch with a firm to get that plan, but I just wanted to make sure that sort of the way that we've drawn the lines, the board is comfortable with. And so C is a pretty straight line. That one's easy to look at. A, our conservation director and I sort of drew those lines today, but she'll be working with the engineer to identify where that line should appropriately be based on where the trails are and where the wetlands are. Yeah.
Yeah, so this isn't final. Yeah, this is not a engineering drawing. This is a
Right, but I just want to make sure that this
Christie
is
drawing.
direction.
I was going to say, if we could save some money by your drawing, I'm good with it.
But I think from a board's perspective, this is all consistent with what we've discussed in the process. So I know we're at 6 o'clock, but if the board wants to
Yep.
just make a motion on it now, or we can continue to afterwards, but
Do we have a,
I don't see.
okay, I'll make a motion.
Okay.
And then we can discuss and figure out where we're going.
Yep.
So I move to execute the purchase and sale agreement for the purchase of property located at 0 Ruggles Street containing 15.42 acres, more or less, for consideration of $325,000, subject to the contingencies set forth in said purchase and sale agreement.
Second?
And moving second, any further questions or comments on it? Okay, roll call vote. Allen?
Edinburgh, yes.
Welch, yes.
Johnson, yes.
Keo, yes.
Marshall, yes.
So that's 5-0, 5 being present. Thank you all for that. Okay, well, welcome everybody. This is our scheduled public forum for a discussion on tax classification. I'll just give a brief introduction here, kind of setting the stage kind of how we got here today. So at the Select Board's April retreat, one goal of the board was to provide communication and education to the public around tax classification, something that we've heard in the past. So that was a goal that we set for ourselves back in April at our retreat. On July 8th, the town finance staff posted materials on the webpage and shared out links to the Select Board, the Advisory Finance Committee, and to the public to provide some initial background on tax classification. On July 19th, we had a presentation about tax classification from our chief assessor, who's standing in front of us right now, basically what it is, how it works, et cetera. That followed with an August 23rd follow-up presentation from the chief assessor to answer any outstanding questions that the board had at that time. So then tonight, we're here, September 13th. So this is the public forum is advertised in the Community Advocate, on social media, and at the Westborough for Life event that was just held this past Sunday. So what we'll do tonight is we'll have staff present information about, and some of these are follow-ups to discussions we've already had, but about comparative communities, including status of tax rate, use of tax increment financing or TIFs, and items like that. And then it is now tonight for the board and for the public, because it's a public forum, and I see a number of people here, so people did receive notification. And unlike church, you don't all have to sit in the back, but anybody is welcome to ask questions and comment here. This is definitely a public session for everybody, but we will just start with a few short remarks to kind of set the stage. And then kind of some follow-up things at our October town meeting as we go through this process of setting the warrant for that meeting at October 17th, and work the Finance Committee will do along with staff and the board. We will be reflecting our kind of new, estimated increases, typical work that the Finance Committee does and prepares in their books to give people an idea of what we think estimated tax rates will be for the following year based on votes taken at town meeting. And then the final piece of the puzzle will be November 22nd, which is when we intend to hold our tax classification hearing. And this is when the actual numbers, finalized numbers, will be presenting. And the decision on whether, on a few things as has been identified to us, but I think what most people are most interested in is the tax classification, the tax split, single tax rate, or a tax rate of split rate of 1, or something other than that will be made at that meeting. So that's where those scenarios will be presented to the board using those actual numbers, and where a vote will be taken. And again, that's a public hearing for folks at that time, and that will be advertised to the public, and we'll get the word out for that meeting, but letting it know right now that November 22nd, so mark that on your calendars today. Christy, anything that I missed? And probably not, because you provided me a lot of the details here, so thank you. She said she'd make me look smart, so hopefully it looks smart. And if it didn't, then it's Christy's fault. So, Jonathan, thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me back. Jonathan Steinberg, Chief Assessor. Just want to let you know that some of the other department heads think that you're playing favorites by having me out so many times. So,
I was just waiting for you to get it right, so.
There you go. So I want to start just by stepping back for a minute and talking about what classification means and how we separate the different types of properties. The residential properties consisting of single-family homes, condominiums, multifamily properties, large apartment complexes, congregate housing, and daycare. All fall within that residential class. Commercial properties, things like offices, hotels, retail, industrial, manufacturing, research and development, or warehouses. And then there's a third category under that CIP, which is personal property, which is machinery and equipment used in the conduct of business. So for companies that do business in town in this state, they are taxable for their stuff. And depending on what type of corporation they are, determines what stuff they are taxable for. There are certain exempt entities within that. There's a lot of detail to it, but it's the third category of what's known as CIP, commercial, industrial, and personal property. For fiscal 22, the fiscal 22 levy, we had 69.67% of our levy, of our value, was residential, and that was $3,155,483,421 in value, and the CIP value was 30.33%, or $1,373,895,723. The taxes raised from the residential side was $58 million and change, and the CIP was $25,403,332, and that's with the single rate. They're all paying the same rate, and that's what was contributed by each class of real estate and personal property for fiscal 22. So I was asked to take a look at what are our dashboard communities. This is a list of communities that the town has chosen as comparables so that all departments and all areas of the town were comparing the same communities. This is our dashboard communities. You can see us at the top where we have the largest percent of non-residential property at 30.33%. And we have what a 1 as a CIP shift. One indicates a single rate. And for fiscal '22, our average tax bill was $10,328 with an average single family of $558, $576. And what you'll see there is the majority of our comparable communities have a single rate with some exceptions. The top four, including us, I guess 1, 2, 3, 4 other ones, Northborough through Hopkinton there, have single rates, and you can see the tax bills vary. The one interesting thing that I noted when reviewing this is of the top 3 tax bills up there, 2 of the 3 have split rates, and they're split to the maximum, but you can see their taxes are still very high. And one of the things I've tried to emphasize through this process is there's 2 numbers really to talk about when you talk about what your tax bill is. It's your value is only one part of the math, but what really drives your taxes is the other part of the equation, which is spending. And so in a town like Lexington, where granted their average single home value is 1.2 million, they have maxed out how much they can shift. And even after the max, they're still paying $16,000 in taxes. So just because you shift does not mean that your taxes go down. So the next step that I did is I pulled some other communities that have higher commercial, industrial, and personal property percentages than what our typical dashboard communities have. Now, some of these communities aren't near us. I provided the total value of the communities so you can see how they compare to us. Where we were 4.5 billion, you can see Wilmington, for example, 5.5 billion. Marlborough, our neighbor, 6.9 billion. And you can see that all of those, with the exception of Northborough, have split the rate. However, all of those have had a split rate similarly for over 20 years. So they did it for the first time a long time ago. And as we discussed at one of the prior meetings, the number of communities that have split the rate or have single rates has stayed pretty stable over the last 20 or 30 or 40 years, I think, for a long time. So most of the communities that have taken advantage of splitting for the first time happened a long time ago. There's a tendency, if you look at, again, at Wilmington here, Wilmington has maxed out their shift, and yet their taxes continue to go up. Okay, they're at 1.75. In your first year of shift, you can only go to 1.5. Certain criteria exist that allow you to go further than that, that relate to the first year that you shift and how much of the levy the residential property taxpayers are paying. So I'm not going to go down that route. I'm going to just skip, let me just, sorry, there was one other slide that I wanted to, so, that I missed. Then I go back. Excuse me 1 second while I skip forward, because I wanted to throw another slide in there. Bear with me 1 second, because I think it's important to see this slide. So this is those communities. And I wanted to show this slide because this is the last 10 years in the shift within these communities. And you can see that a lot of them that have maxed stay maxed because they have no place else to go. You can see that the shift in Mansfield has continued to go up, but until recently when it went down. But taxes have continued to go up. One of the reasons I wanted to point this out was in Framingham, you can see the trend is to go down. And part of the reason that is they had like the perfect storm where they were at their max, they had no place else they could go, and they had a large increase in the residential, and they had a decrease in the commercial, and they had a big hit to their taxes. And there was no place they could go. Okay, and so we've talked a little bit about the tendency to try to pull that back in, and that's one of the communities that has done that. But one of the things I want to demonstrate is that once you go, it's rare that people go back. And so I just wanted to communicate that because I know people have talked about it being a one-time thing and we'll try to do that. It's not the tendency, okay? It's not what we've seen out there. It doesn't mean it's not what Westborough would do. It just means it's not what's common out there. Okay, forgive me. Now let me go back to where we were. So as we discussed at the last meeting, it's difficult to look at these numbers and try to take away some criteria to really compare because you don't know what factors are going on. And I'm going to point to Mansfield last year that had a big drop in the shift. And so I called the assessor there today and I said, Dan, what happened there? And he said, well, we had a reevaluation and they found that with the new assessor in town, there's lots of things that hadn't been done to the commercial industrial properties in years. And so at the 5-year revaluation point, they had a big surge despite what was going on as an assessment data correction for market forces that had happened over a period of years. And so that shift in value, okay, was like where we see this year going from residential to commercial, they had a big shift back the other way. And so the town made a move to make that shift, bring that shift down. They didn't take advantage of it and continued to go. But the point of that is that really the numbers don't stand on their own. We know what goes on in Westborough. We know when they built Westborough Village, so we had 250 condos come online, and there was a big increase in residential value. We know when AstraZeneca left. We know what happens here. Without knowing what's going on in those towns, without knowing if they built a school or they needed an override, a lot of different factors. Shrewsbury last year, for example, everyone had compared us to them for so long. Shrewsbury last year had over $1,000 increase in taxes because they needed a 9% override. So there's a lot of things that go into those numbers, as well as a lot of things to be considered when you're considering Westborough. So what are the real estate market conditions, whether it be the commercial, the residential, the industrial, okay? What are they within the respective towns, and what are they here in Westborough? And how do they fluctuate at different points in time within that historical data that you're looking at? What are the new construction projects? And again, these are things that you want to consider here in Westborough, as well as if you try to extrapolate information from those others. We've talked a little bit about the things going on here in town that I'll just mention while we're here. Things like the Amazon projects, okay? So people know, Amazon Robotics is fully online and within the value for fiscal '22. Okay, for fiscal '23, we will see a portion of the Amazon distribution center that you see up on Otis Street now. You won't see that fully within the value until fiscal '24. You won't see the personal property in there, maybe not even until fiscal '25, depending on when they take occupancy. The other facility that Amazon is building between Amazon Robotics and Amazon Distribution Center, I can't even speak to when that, I mean, it's going to happen, but depending on where they go with their construction will determine what that timetable is. But that could be fiscal '26 before we even see that being done. 4400 Computer Drive, which we know Amazon purchased and has since permitted, we don't know where that is. Amazon at this point hasn't given any indication. There's been articles recently about how they have put a freeze on a lot of their construction. They're pulling out of Milford. So we don't know when that'll happen or if it'll happen. It's a great project. I'm hopeful that they will pull out of a place like Milford where they're renting and it's a multi-tenanted building and see this as opportunity and go forward with this, and they can do it pretty quickly now that it's permitted. Okay, but understand that that is a building that they're going to take down first. So that might have some rollback before it goes up. Similarly with the BJ's property. They're going to come in and build 610,000 square feet of life sciences, which will be a fantastic project, but you're looking at fiscal '25, '26 before we see that, and there'll be a reduction in value until then as they take the buildings down. What's the economic impact for residents as well as businesses, and how does that play into the decision-making of these other towns and communities as well as Westborough? How does it impact economic development, and how do other communities look at that, and what do they do? And then the town budget factors, like I said with Shrewsbury. Just looking at the data points doesn't tell you what went into the decision-making process in those communities and what budgetary items impacted that. Maybe it caused them to increase their shift because they built a school. Maybe it didn't. You know, that's my point of just pointing out that the numbers don't necessarily tell the whole story, and it's up to you to decide what factors apply to Westborough. I've said it before, this is a tax policy decision. It's not made by the Board of Assessors, it's made by the Board of Selectmen in determining what's the policy going to be for Westborough. The next topic we were going to talk about was TIFs, tax increment financing. What is a TIF? A TIF is an incentive offered for development or improvement of a property. Here in town, we have a TIF at Microchem. We have 2 TIFs at Cumberland Farms, one at Olympus and one at Estellas. Okay, and I'm going to use the Olympus one as an example when we get to there. People are often concerned about losing tax dollars. If I can get this to work. There's no loss in taxes with a TIF, okay? A TIF is just for the incremental improvement in the property. So you have a property that's worth $1 million and you build a building on it, it's gonna be worth $10 million. They only get a break on the net amount that wasn't there previously. Because the TIF results, if it results in new construction, it's adding new growth as well. So above the Proposition 2.5 plus new growth that can, in and of itself, provide some relief to taxpayers by increasing the commercial industrial values, okay? And so, like this year, if we have more residential construction, the residential value is going up. An improvement in the property value or improvement in projects in commercial industrial shifts back the other way compared to what we're seeing now. And as well as to consider that a TIF generates other incidental tax benefits, okay? If business travel returns, hopefully it will, we'll start filling up the hotels. We have good hotel and meal tax revenue. And hopefully that will continue. They frequent the businesses. So there's lots of incidentals as well, not to mention the fact that companies like Olympus and Estellas, their people want to live here. It's good for the community. It helps you with the real estate values as well. So here's just the example of 800 West Park Drive. 800 West Park Drive was a piece of land assessed at $2 million. Okay, the project, when complete, this is the estimate, was $18,750,000. So the benefit to the town in value was $16.749 million. Okay, it's that $16.749 million that is going to be adjusted throughout the TIF. And so on the left-hand side, you can see the reduction amounts over the life of the TIF. It starts at half, and again, that's simply half of that net benefit. So the net benefit as calculated was $343,688. Half of that was their benefit in the first year, and it goes down from there. Okay, on the right-hand side is the TIF for their personal property. It only lasts 5 years, and again, you can see that it's a declining scale. And the important thing to emphasize again is that this was a $2 million piece of land. Without this project, it would still be a $2 million piece of land. Whether or not this would have happened without it, we don't know. You've probably heard me say this before, but you don't know what you don't get, and you don't. I know that they were considering other locations. Would they have gone someplace else? I don't know. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Zach Bauer, who's going to give you some additional information on his research on TIFs and economic development and budgeting.
Well, while Zach's getting up, I just wanted to mention, so the select board, as Ian pointed out in the beginning of this, provided several questions that they, I think, have on their own, but also are hearing from the community. And one of the questions that we heard was, are changes in tax rates, do they have an impact on the number of TIFs that a community is asked to provide? And also, is there an increase in an economic development budget based on sort of a dual or a single tax rate? And so those are the questions that John's answering and that Zach's going to be answering.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Christy. I'm Zach Bauer, Economic Development Coordinator, and I'm here to answer some of the questions that Christy just alluded to regarding TIFs and economic development spend as it relates to tax classification. I should be pretty brief. Starting out, basically my methodology was to marry two data sets, one from the Division of Local Services, which explains which communities are single versus split tax rates, and the other is the Massachusetts Economic Development Incentive Program's annual reports. The EDIP, which is the acronym for that agency, is the state agency that approves both state tax increment financing agreements and local only tax increment financing agreements. TIFs can have a state tax break component TIFs can have both the state tax break component as well as be just local only, but EDIP approves them all. And so what I did was I looked at the TIFs that had been issued from 2016 to 2022, so over the last 6 years or so, and tried to map them to single and split tax rate communities. A handful of those communities had changed their tax classification in that time frame, and we can, a future slide takes a look at those 15 communities that did that. Some of the major top line takeaways were that TIFs do appear to be more common in dual tax rate communities than they are in single tax rate communities. So there were a total of 205 TIFs across the Commonwealth from 2016 to 2022, and 75% of those TIFs were located in split tax rate communities as opposed to single tax rate communities. On the right-hand side of this slide, I've listed the top 15 municipalities that issued TIFs over that time period, and as you can see, the top 10 or 11 or so of those are all split tax rate communities. And so the top communities are places like Fall River, New Bedford, Pittsfield, Worcester, all which have a split tax rate and have given around 10 TIFs in that time frame. I do want to caveat this a little bit by saying that there are a lot of other factors that go into the frequency in which a town or city is going to issue TIFs. So some of these communities are more development intense than places like Westborough, and that is going to lead to more TIFs naturally than in some of our more comparison group municipalities. Additionally, some of these cities are in opportunity zones or gateway zones where TIFs can be more common as well. And so this is part of the picture, but I don't think the entire picture can be explained away by this. But the high level data does indicate that TIFs are more commonly used in split tax rate communities. This next slide is just another way of looking at that data. So on this slide, I took out the communities that changed their tax rate from 2016, or changed their tax classification from 2016 to 2022. And you can look here at, of the TIFs that were issued, or of the municipalities that either have a single tax rate or a split tax rate, what percentage of them have offered TIFs in the past. And so you can see for single tax rate communities, only 13% or 30 of those communities have offered a TIF since 2016, whereas 87% or about 200 of those communities did not. For split tax rate communities, it's closer to 50. It is 50-50. So 54 of those 108 communities did offer a TIF from 2016 to 2022, and 54 did not. So, what this slide goes to show is that if you're a single tax rate community, it's actually quite rare to offer TIFs, whereas the split tax rate communities, it really is more of a 50-50 discussion. And as I had previously mentioned, that those two slides and the analysis therein excludes the communities that changed their tax classification over the time period that was studied. And this here is a look at some of the communities that did change their tax classification in that time period. And I think the major takeaway is that there really isn't a clear pattern here for the impact of changing the tax classification on, either giving more TIFs afterwards or having given more TIFs beforehand. That said, a lot of these changes are still pretty recent, and I think as our Chief Assessor, John Steinberg, had just alluded to, the effects of changing a tax classification, the effects of developments on a community's tax rate, take time to really hit the books and, for folks to see and feel. And so, it's possible that these numbers change in the next couple years, especially for those communities that switched from a single tax rate to a split tax rate. But right now, from the direction of single to split, we've got one community that has issued more TIFs after they made that change than beforehand, and that's North Attleboro, which is the first line in this slide. They reclassified from a single to split from 2016 to 2017, and then they've done 2 TIFs since that date. There are 2 other communities which have changed their tax rate and then issued a TIF in the same time period. Those are Webster and Westford, and they're towards the bottom of this slide. Webster went from a split tax rate to a single tax rate, and then actually issued a TIF after making that change. Westford went the same direction, but had issued TIFs before while they were on a split tax rate, and then haven't issued any since changing to a single tax rate. All that said, with the caveat that a lot of this data is pretty recent. We've got a couple numbers up here where towns have switched their tax rate as recently as last year, and so it may take some time to see the real effect of those changes. And then that sort of wraps up my response to the question about what's the impact of tax classification on TIFs and TIF frequency. I was also asked to look into whether or not communities with single or split tax rates have any kind of trend as it pertains to the amount of money they spend on economic development budgets. And ultimately, what I discovered for this question is that it's actually very unclear, and there are a lot of reasons why that's the case. One is that even within our dashboard communities, what their economic development departments do varies a lot. So I'm going to just kind of casually flip through these next couple slides a little bit because they're all just extensions of the same chart. But you can see here, Lexington, their economic development office spends an annual gross budget of $408,657, which adjusted for population breaks down to $11.86 per capita. But their economic development department has functions that are much different than I think what ours are and what Westborough would ever need. Lexington, the home of the famous Battle of Lexington and Concord, their economic development office operates a visitor center with 7 part-time employees and 1 full-time employee, and so that significantly bifurcates what they're going to be spending on economic development versus us. There are several other communities that I looked at that are in our comparison group, such as Hudson or Shrewsbury, which are at the top of this slide here, which do spend more than we do on economic development, but their economic development budget also includes other departmental functions that we house with other staff. So for example, both Shrewsbury and Hudson, their community development departments, which is how their budget breaks down, they don't have a separate line item for economic development. It's all rolled into one agency like that. The figures that are here include what you would typically see a planning board, ZBA, Conservation Commission do in addition to their economic development functions. And it just wasn't possible to break out what, at an expense level, they're spending on things like marketing or printing or dues and memberships that are specifically related to economic development and not any of these other functions. And that was a case in many of the municipalities that I looked at. Not always the same complementary functional groups were rolled in with economic development, but you'd oftentimes see things like planning and economic development together, or conservation and economic development together. I believe one community, Ashland, actually has their townwide communications function rolled into their economic development office. And so while I think the spirit of the question is well-founded, and I think that this would be a great question to answer, I'm not sure that with the way economic development offices are organized and sit in other peer communities, that this is a question that's going to give us any kind of meaningful answer towards progressing to a decision on this. I will pause with that, and I think, John, I'm messing up your slides, but I'll leave a moment for the select board to answer any questions, and then later, if any members of the public have questions, I'm happy to answer those as well.
Great, thanks, Zach, and thanks, John. Open up to the board if there's any questions or comments. On our side, this is our third time with you, so I do want to, this is a public forum, do want to give the public chance for questions or comments. But anything, Alan's shaking his head. Good?
I'd say just one quick question. So, John, you were talking about Mansfield and how all of their commercial and industrial properties are getting reevaluated. Just based on your experience, I guess, how would you expect those property owners to react to that? I would imagine a lot will be trying to abate those. And
Yes, they weren't real happy.
but how long, I
But
guess,
they
did
had
that
complained
time
less in the prior years when there weren't those changes going on.
Yeah.
So Dan did get a lot of pushback and a lot of guff, but he's an experienced assessor and weathered the storm. How that works out at the appellate tax board level, it's unclear. I think many of them sort of understood the fact that there had been minimal adjustments over time and had a hard time disputing the actual value versus trying to dispute the net. I often tell people, like, it's unfortunate that it went up a lot in 1 year. However, you can only fight about the actual number. Is your property worth that? We don't have the luxury of looking at the net adjustment. The state doesn't say, well, we'll do a little bit this year, a little bit next year. That doesn't fly.
Thank you.
You have a question?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. First of all, thank you for putting all the work into answering these questions and putting the presentation together. My question is simply about the presentation. Is this something that we can publish up on the town website with the other material that's out there?
Yeah, we've published everything that we've done on the town website.
Terrific, thank you.
Great. Well, I will open it up to the public. This is a public forum. Anybody feel free. What I would ask is kind of orderly fashion, but come to the microphone. Just state your name for the record. And it's an opportunity to ask questions of anybody here, but especially those that know more than the select board does. But if you have questions, select board, you can ask us too, but also to provide any comments. Again, this is a step in the process, but yep, please.
Good evening. My name is Bob McGuire. I actually live next door in Hopkinton, but I've spent many years on their economic development committee, and we've talked about split tax rate multiple times in our town. And I just want to, the reason I'm here is I've worked in the commercial real estate field now for 25 years, in particular in Metro West, so I'm very familiar with your town. And I think today with your single rate, you have a competitive advantage over some of your neighbors, in particular Marlborough. And at the end of the day, some people think the landlords or the owners pay the taxes, and if they can spend millions on a building, they can afford the taxes, but the tenants actually pay the taxes. And if those buildings aren't full, they're looking for reduced rates on their buildings. But the tenants, it's a competitive advantage whether they're looking at some other towns that have dual rate, because it does stand out, the two different tax rates, particularly you take a town like Framingham, which is significantly higher than Westborough. So I would just make the recommendation you keep a single rate tax. I think it gives you that competitive advantage over some of the neighboring towns.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, Mark?
Hello, I'm Mark Verreau. I work for Caruth Capital, 116 Flanders Road in Westborough. Caruth Capital has been doing business in Westborough for 32 years. I've been with Caruth Capital for 30 of those years. Every building that we've purchased, I worked on purchasing them, not just in Westborough, but 40 buildings throughout the state. Caruth has been the largest taxpayer of real estate taxes and sometimes total taxes in the town of Westborough for many years. I'm here to tell you that going to a dual tax rate is not necessarily a winning game, because unlike residential property that's based on schools, education, location, the quality of living in the town. That's what determines the value of a home. Commercial property is only dependent on income, period. Nothing else matters. You only buy commercial property for income. If your taxes go up, your income goes down, and so the value of the property is less. It's not a sum game, so that's just based on what you're willing to earn for income. Now, as Bob mentioned, there's a mix between what the tenants pay taxes and also the landlords pay taxes, because we have vacant buildings, and we pay the taxes on vacant buildings. And I can tell you that Westborough has a competitive advantage to other towns. One of the biggest competitors is Marlborough. Marlborough hands out TIFs all the time, not just new properties, not just on the incremental value. I mean, it's almost funny because, if you go into the office there and you see a bowl of mints, well, Marlborough has that bowl with TIFs. I've been here, as I mentioned, for 30 years. Caruth has been here for 32 years. We asked for a TIF once, and that was Olympus. And that was a property that we owned for 16 years, and for 12 years we did all the site work ready to go, sitting there vacant. There was a lot of competition, and I can tell you, because I know for a fact that Framingham and Marlborough were giving TIFs that were much more lucrative than what Westborough gave, because Westborough has a very reasonable tax rate anyway, and then Westborough's TIFs only last for a certain period of time, and the percentage was a lot less, whereas Marlborough, the TIFs go for a lot longer and for a much higher percentage. So who ends up being harmed by these TIFs? Or who pays the full rate? Well, I can look out these windows, and you look on Main Street, those are the people that are going to pay the full split tax rate. Because when you go to a split rate, the big companies, BJ's is moving to Marlborough, they have a great TIF. Almost every company that goes to Marlborough. And I'm surprised about how they give them to smaller companies, because usually they're the ones that really pay for the dual tax rate, not the big companies, So that's who's going to pay for these. As far as improving the tax rate, as a large owner of land here, I think having by right development, a quick process, and looking at some of the rules and regulations that make it hard for us to build new properties. When I first started working for Caruth, the commercial properties in Westborough paid 50% of the taxes in this town. And now Westborough's commercial tax rate pays 30%. And why is that? Well, a big reason for that is it's a lot easier and more lucrative to build houses in Westborough than it is to build commercial properties. And secondly, residential properties have increased in value. Westborough's a good town, and property values have gone up. Commercial properties, again, based on income, drive through some of the commercial properties, Westborough Executive Park, Westborough Business Park, West Park Drive. There were empty driveways there. And, with a 30% vacancy rate, is now the time to really burden commercial property owners with increased expenses and decreasing our competitive advantage that we have? Look, we sold 4,400 Computer Drive to Amazon for $65 million. Now, Amazon didn't ask for a TIF, because, and I was involved in this, so I can tell you that they looked at the tax rate and said, if we went to Marlborough or somewhere else, with the TIF we'd pay the same, so, we have a good building, a good location, let's not drag this out. And I'll tell you, I'm glad they didn't drag it out, because if this sale had been postponed for another 2 or 3 months, it probably wouldn't have happened. So timing of getting things done is very important if you're looking to increase the tax base. You had asked a couple of questions, and does a dual tax rate increase the application for TIFs? Absolutely. And I can tell you, because most people in town see the deals that want to come here. You don't see the deals that go somewhere else. I do. We do. And And I can tell you that Marlboro and Framingham are very competitive. They worked very hard to try and land Olympus. And, you know, just right now, we just did a lease with Bank of New York Mellon, 77,000 feet, occupying most of a building at 118 Flanders Road. We didn't ask for a TIF. They didn't ask for a TIF. And they've been at 4400 Computer Drive. So regarding the timing of that, they're not going to be out of there till next year. So Amazon was going to start early because 55% of that building is vacant. They're going to knock that building B down. And that's, with everything else at Amazon, that's been put on hold. So I think it's a great location for them. And I think, you know, I'm pretty sure they're going to proceed with it. But, you know, they're in no rush right now. I don't know if you have any questions, but, you know, you know, this is not a gain. The total taxes in the town, I don't know, John, if you can confirm, the total taxes are going to be the same, right? There's not going to be additional revenue. Is that capped? Here's my question as well as the comments.
That is correct. They're going to raise what balance they need to meet the budget.
So the total taxes are 2.5% cap, right?
Well, no, 2.5 plus new growth in the excess levy, but they're going to raise the same amount of taxes, whether it's split. It's just about shifting the burden of the taxes from one to the other.
So I'd like to thank you very much for allowing us to speak. And if you have any questions, you know, we really want to keep doing business and attracting people to Westborough, and we hope that you don't approve this split. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes.
I just want to clarify a couple things so you understand the difference in what perhaps Zach mentioned and some of the comments Mark made. With relation to some of the TIFs that Marlboro offers, they're offering them on tenant fit up, so it's an existing building. Someone's going to move into the existing building, and so relative to the improved value, you're not having that same thing as building new construction or full renovation like what Estella's did. And so you don't see that same realization of improved value to a town. So I just wanted to clarify that. And the other thing I'll clarify just comment on, because I hear everyone that comes in my office saying location, location, location. Westborough's a great location, it absolutely is, but people do have a choice, and I think I went into this a bit at our last meeting, is not all businesses are so reliant on the intersection of these highways that they can't move their office space to one of the other nearby communities. And so, yes, location matters, but anyone who owns their own business that has a choice of paying higher expenses or lower expenses, that's the message that Mark was sending out, is that people have a choice. And that's, location is one factor, but so is expenses.
Thanks. Other questions or, yep. Back.
Good evening. I don't know which one to go to.
Either one.
Either one.
Or both together if you want.
Okay. My name is Rebecca Roman. I'm the hospital administrator of Whittier Rehabilitation Hospital and Outpatient Center, 150 Flanders Road in Westborough. And I have been with the company since 1997. I've been in the role of administrator since 2008, and the company's been there, I believe, since 1996 when we took over the property. Did renovation and have been here obviously on purpose to be able to serve the central Massachusetts area and provide post-acute care. And it has been a privilege and an honor to be there. I will tell you, as everyone has experienced, there's been a lot of changes in the past 2.5 years as a result of the pandemic. A lot of changes in expenses and certainly changes in healthcare. And as one of the larger employers in the area, we have over 350 employees at my location, I can pretty confidently say that it's been an outright challenge to stay functioning, especially during the pandemic, with increased costs of staffing, personnel, as any company and any small business in the area has had to experience. So I take opposition to the idea of a split tax rate, mostly because every added expense that we've had to entail, this is just another layer. I have to pay bonuses to make shifts safe for patients to be taken care of. I have to pay recruitment bonuses just to get personnel to show up, just like any other small business. I get no change in my reimbursement from healthcare, and in fact, in this day and age, insurance companies are more inclined to approve you and then retro deny you, saying that, oh, you did deliver the care, but now we don't think it was needed, so we're going to take that money back. So we're left with the cost and cost and cost on top of cost in terms of taking care of patients. And we serve the people in this geographic area. Adding an additional burden of tax onto a commercial business like ours and to other locations and other healthcare locations in the commercially zoned areas would be traumatic. We can't get by with the staff that we have, and then you add cost of an additional tax burden. It would be very challenging. And I'm a larger business. I can't only imagine what it would be on a smaller business. So I just wanted to put my view out there. I'm representing the company, and we are not in favor of a split tax classification. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name's Karen Chapman. I'm the president of the Quarter 9495 Regional Chamber of Commerce, and I have been before this board before to talk about tax classification. And quite frankly, my remarks are not going to be all that different from who you've heard from that have come before me, except with the exception of that 85% of the members of this chamber are small business. And one of the things that we keep talking about is obviously there's the corporate business side of this, but there's the small business part of this community. The town has done a great job in hoping up that sign that says we're business friendly. Obviously, single tax classification has been one of those great signs out there saying that we love business. Your Economic Development Committee has done a great job in making changes to bring more people to downtown and more attraction to downtown. But the truth of it all, too, is when a pandemic happened, life changed. And we're still trying to recover from that change. I can tell you, for example, I have her talking to Dob Fabiano from Arturo's Restaurant. He used to rely heavily on all those office buildings, bringing people down for those business lunch. He has not opened for business since the pandemic. At the end of the day, businesses had to change their hours. Businesses had to make a lot of adjustments. The cost of doing business, it's tough, and going to a dual tax classification does quite frankly not say a business-friendly town to them. At the end of the day, property owners are going to slide those costs down, as you had heard from others, down to all businesses and small businesses. Obviously, is a big part of that. I am proud to say that your business membership of this chamber has been great supporters of this town. Over $180,000 in scholarships to your graduating high school seniors here in Westborough. Over $80,000 in mini grants back to your schools here in Westborough. Hundreds of donations of supplies and equipment from the business community back to your schools. Business members volunteering their time for Community Day, mock job interviews, school advisory councils, multicultural fairs, and many other programs. And due to the generosity of this business community, over 13,000 food items donated to the Westborough Food Pantry. At the end of the day, your business community is the backbone of the rich and prosperity of this town. And on behalf of the Quarter 9 Chamber, I hope that you will really continue to maintain a single tax classification. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else for questions or comments? Anything looking to the board? Anything? Christy?
I just wanted to point out, as you did in the beginning, that the actual tax classification hearing is November 22nd, where the board will make the decision. And so that's also typically, this was part of our education series, but also typically where we might hear some of these comments. So just putting that out there for folks who have made comments that the actual classification hearing is in November.
Yep, thank you for that. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everybody. And really, I think a lot of other people were here and I'm sure listened. At any time, comments can be sent to us on the select board. So feel free to send that out. That goes to, if you use the address on the town website, which is, correct me, selectboard@town.westborough.mass.us. But you can actually click the button on the select board site. That will go out to the five of us, and we'll be able to read that message and take that into consideration as we do continue to prepare for that tax classification hearing coming up on November 22nd. So thank you all for attending that piece. I think with no further comments or questions, we will continue on with our regularly scheduled program here tonight. So,
So Chief Purcell is here.
okay, perfect. So I'm hiding in the back there. So the next thing, moving on to the second bullet on item 5, which is reviewing warrant articles for the October town meeting. We'll have the fire chief come forward to discuss his warrant articles. Just actually before you start, Pat, too, I just, for those that came in with our agenda tonight, we had some things planned early on in the agenda that went quicker than we had scheduled for, so we did move a bunch of things around. We did hear earlier from Chris Payant doing the DPW warrant articles. So those have already been gone through. For those that wanted to hear those and missed them, you can see those on Westborough TV later, as we noted that this is being recorded. But now, Chief Purcell, thanks.
Hi, thanks for having me. Patrick Purcell, serving as your fire chief. So I'm here before you tonight regarding an article that I submitted to the town manager to procure a new ambulance to replace a 2013 GMC ambulance that we currently use within our fleet. It's one of our reserve vehicles with, I looked today, 140,000 miles on it. I'm assuming that you have some questions regarding operating outside of the capital plan and why it's on the October town meeting. And I wanted to just prepare or talk a little bit about why I'm submitting it early, which is not uncommon, as you might have heard in the spring, with some equipment and personnel shortages throughout the nation. So in the ambulance world, we usually buy an ambulance for us every 3 years, and they last 9 as a frontline vehicle and move into a reserve status for 3. We've had an escalating call volume. This year it's excessive. We're projected to hit about 6,000 calls for service. Just today alone, we're at number 16 and the shift's not half over. Those are 65 to 70% EMS calls. And the reason for the early ask is our fleet, the amount of miles we're putting on them. So I'm talking about the one we're getting rid of now has 130,000. Our 2018 that we have broke 100,000 today. The 2020 that's been in service for a year and a half broke 50,000 miles already. 2016 is already at 130,000 miles as well. And the biggest deal is the ordering. So when I order a Lifeline ambulance, which is the vendor we use, we order a Ford F550, we have to wait for Ford to open their portal to order a cab and chassis. The vendor buys the cab and chassis, they ship it to their factory, they build the box for the back, then it comes to the local vendor, they finish the outfit, and it comes to us. The portal actually opens, ironically, on the date of town meeting at midnight. So if we are fortunate enough to have the article approved, I'm going to be green lighting by text from that meeting so they can order one. Projected to start building cabs and chassis at Ford in January, but our overall build time is 2 years from whenever I hit green light. If I wait until March town meeting, I won't get a cab and chassis this year, and I'll be waiting until next October to get in line and I confirmed all this on my way here from the vendor. I'll be waiting until next October to be able to order the next year's model cab and chassis, which would in essence put us out another year and a half beyond the 2 years from this October. The way that the call volume is escalated, I can't wait that long. We'll end up with my 3 frontline trucks over 100,000 in our reserve, well over 100,000 by the time that comes in. That's not good long term. That's terrible for our fleet. It's terrible for the people that have to ride in the ambulance, and it makes our fleet unreliable. So that was my reason for asking 6 months early to operate outside of the capital plan. And if you have any questions regarding that, please fire at will.
Good, over to the board. Yep, Shelby.
Thank you, Chief. Couple of questions. So you said Lifeline is the vendor we work with. I don't know your industry, how many vendors are out there. I don't want to know how many vendors, but have we considered others, or is the supply chain the same regardless?
So the supply chain is the same regardless. Everybody they use primarily Ford.
Yep.
Some use Dodge. Some use GMC.
Yep.
I would say I've only, in my 33 years, I've only worked in 2 vehicles that weren't a Ford, and I've worked in 100 ambulances.
So it really starts at the Ford, the
It
chassis, and then it goes down to the vendor.
Yes.
To do the build out.
Yes.
Okay. And that portal for Ford only opens once a year?
Yes, for the next year's cab and chassis. Yeah.
Wow.
And there's such a demand for vehicles. I believe I provided the manager an article at our last monthly meeting. There is such a shortage for vehicles right now. They're going to get bought up quick.
Yeah.
I'm envisioning our sales rep to take a chance on us because we use him, and we already quoted out a truck with him that he's gonna be able to get rid of the truck even if the taxpayer said no.
Yeah.
He's gonna be able to sell it to somebody else, but I'm envisioning that's gonna happen for us.
And how accurate do we feel the $350,000 that's being asked to, for fall would be the actual purchase price versus having to go back for more, based on cost?
I think it's $347 for the truck, and then I actually scaled back for equipment because the price is high. I don't know, Shelby.
Okay.
I actually don't know.
I mean, my
prices have been
question-
escalating.
I mean, it's always great to come in under, but to me, it's more painful it's always great to be able to return some. So, I mean, is the request more realistically 375?
No.
No, okay. I mean,
No.
I'm just giving you a number, but.
So, I'm confident that I can get it for the 347.
Yep.
If there is an issue, I think the issue would be in less than $10,000, which then, that's when I'm gonna start haggling on the trade hard.
Yep.
And, I'm gonna make it happen.
And you mentioned maybe some modifications or around equipment. We're not, I guess, we want you guys to have the right equipment. It's life-saving equipment, so we're not shorting ourselves there, right?
No.
Okay.
8,000 of the 10 is going towards a radio, to be honest. 7,500 is going towards a radio alone.
Yep.
We were fortunate enough through ARPA or CARES Act money. We worked with Leah, and we get all of our stretches recently upgraded to be self-loading. So we took advantage of that opportunity, and a lot of the physical medical equipment that can get moved over because that's not
Okay, yep.
That's
Thank
not
you.
10 years old to 12 years old.
Thanks very much.
Sean?
Yeah, quick. So maybe, Chief, you can talk about how this isn't a free cash item, it's ambulance receipts. So it's sort of, the service provided then pays for the new ambulance, right? And sort of how that works for the voters.
Sure. So this traditionally comes out of correct me if I'm wrong, ambulance receipts reserved for EMS fund. So we bill for the ambulance. It's like a user fee, similar to what the school department would do for like athletics or et cetera. And we hold out a certain amount of our billed revenue every year to support the purchase of the vehicles for our fleet. So we don't use free cash. We don't use
Taxpayer money.
Right.
taxpayer money.
So it's interesting, it's almost like all those miles on the ambulance is paying for a new ambulance.
Though, that is true. That is, yeah.
That's such a bright view.
Yeah.
Nice.
But I think the question here really was
Great point.
kind of more around timing. I think you've answered that question. We all know supply chain issues. We're all seeing the news about demand now that people put things on hold coming in. You know, I think you've explained exactly. It's just, who knows, it will change. Hopefully things change back, but it's something we planned for. We just didn't plan to come to October for it. This has been an ambulance. It's been on the plan. It's just, we're just accelerating the ask for it.
And I think we've seen the same thing with the last 2 fire trucks. So we ordered one at the beginning of COVID that was supposed to have been in already, and then it got pushed till January, and now we're pushed into the end of next July. And the second one that we ordered was supposed to be the following January, and that's already pushed into August of 2024, I believe. So we're pushing 2 to 3 years for the delivery of apparatus right now, which is also challenging because they want to give us a price for what it's projected to cost those years, and I'm assuming they're somewhat inflated because they don't know and they don't want to take a loss, and then we take the hit. But if we wait, we won't have a reliable fleet.
Yep.
For the busiest part of our department.
I have a stupid question, but when do we pay for the ambulance? When we receive it, or do we pay some up front, and then how does that all work?
We pay upon receipt.
Okay.
Technically, we can't pay for something until we have it and own it. You could do a lot of paperwork through a lease program and then try to pay it off, but there's a penalty, and they're gonna get the same amount of money.
That's what I thought, but so we have to appropriate so you can order it, so you have to say the town voted to pay for it, but we won't be paying that money out for, say, 2 years.
Right, so it's gonna sit there.
Yeah, earn some money in reserves. Other questions, Patrick?
Yeah, no, I just had a comment. I just want to thank the chief for bringing this forward and keeping your eye on the target in regards to these policies and procedures and how they interact with, the supply chain. That's a really difficult many balls to juggle there to understand what's happening. So thank you for doing that. I'm very supportive of this. I guess I do have one question, and that is around, and you might not have this number off the top of your head. I'm not sure if Christy does or Leah does in the audience. What's going to be left in that fund after this move? Is there?
I think I can answer. I think it was less than 15,000, correct? 357. I think it's 8,000 left. $3,000.
Okay. So it'll bring it down quite a ways. Okay. Thank you, Chief.
That's just so you know, that's pretty typical. As the cost of ambulances have increased, we've actually increased the amount of receipts that have gone into that account so that we're able to cover these ambulances as they come up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good. Thanks, Chief. Anything else? Nope.
All right.
Great.
Thanks. Have a great night.
You too.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, just saw Amber and school committee folks walk in. So the next, Amber, if you're ready, and Lisa, if I'm not sure who's presenting on the school department articles, but. Welcome.
Hello. Let me just pull up a slide here. As I do so, Amber Bach, 10 Arch Street, Superintendent of Schools. Good to see you. Welcome back to school season as we move into working more closely together during budget season here. We're going to be looking at the current budget regarding warrant article. So let me just open this up, and I will. You don't want to look at my email, so I'm going to pull the article up first. All right, let me just get there. Okay.
Just for folks that have looked, I think this is Article 5 on the warrant 2 that we have out there right now.
All right, see how that will come up, and I'll lift that up. Okay, let me make it a little bigger for you. That's probably too big. Well, that'll work. Okay. All right, good to see you. I appreciate you taking time tonight and giving me a moment to review the current proposed budget deficit adjustment to the 22-23 fiscal year, which we're currently implementing. I presented at AFC on Thursday. If you had an opportunity to see that, I spent about a little over an hour answering questions. I know you don't have that time tonight, so I would direct you to review that. I could send you the link following this if you want. It just has a more in-depth discussion. And I think AFC did a really good job to ask a series of thoughtful questions, and we presented the same information that I'll present tonight. So if you feel like I'm moving too quickly, when we get into circuit breaker, if you have questions around those things, I'd advise going back to that. I'm certainly always willing to take time and answer questions, but I'm cognizant always that you have quite a few things to cover tonight. So I submitted to Christie an article regarding a budget deficit that we have in the current operational costs due to the outplacement of 8 students, and then it moved to 9 between the close of the budget last year and the vote for the fiscal year budget and operational start of this year. So I submitted, you see the number at the top, the 539, which represents the private tuition placement of 8 students out of district for special education costs. I think what I'd like to do is maybe step you through the numbers and then give you a little bit of a framework, and I'll ask you just to be patient while I provide the synopsis, and then I can take questions. Typically within our budget, we always carry a form of a stabilization account. We have the opportunity in the school budget in special education cost, if we have funding available, to prepay up to 3 months of tuition for encumbered tuitions in any annual year. Over the years, we've been able to provide an in-budget stabilization fund that basically was that 3 months of prepay. And that prepay will be allowable for 3 months for whatever range of tuitions you have encumbered in any given year. And so we also, over the years, used to hold 100,000 out from circuit breaker budgetarily to hold for cases where we had outplacement or move-ins to district that might require an emergency para placement. The movement of special education is always really pretty highly volatile during the year and can have some large numbers attached to it. So we're talking about students in our district in terms of within Westborough who have required outplacement to other school settings, private special education settings. We know that those are very costly, and they also then encumber tuition costs. And so the case that we have right here, and it's not a case that you've seen certainly in my time here, and I think over many, many years of the school department bringing a budget forward, that we've had an anomaly where we have a budget gap like this, where we had that many students outplaced between the finalization of the budget plan as voted and the number of students that needed to be transitioned to another setting. So across the span of the FY22 budget, we basically utilized the stabilization fund to pay that tuition as those students were outplacing in the district, and therefore had no prepay to move forward into the 3-month allowable. So we're coming into this current year with 0 prepay in place to pick up errors or transitions during the year in terms of tuitions, errors being increased to tuition costs that are unanticipated or outplacements. So we're facing the current fiscal year, which obviously has just gotten started, with no stabilization fund in place to pick up any changes. And the number that I'm going to walk through with you are current encumbered costs, bills that we will have to pay, students that are already out of district and not budgeted for. Hence, we submitted in August the request for additional funding to cover these tuition costs. And I'm going to step you through the students. All right, he just emerged. Can you guys hear me? Are you okay?
Yeah, I think he's
you're
just
just trying
waiting
to
for
pull
that
up the
screen.
screen?
I'm
Okay.
fine.
But we're okay, we can see the big one.
All right. So to give you the synopsis of the numbers, as I said, during last school year, we had 8 students transition out to the cost of the 539, which was the number I submitted to Christie in August when the budget request was due for fall town meeting. And then we had a 9th student outplace for an additional $89,833 as of August 1st, move-in and outplacement as of now. So that student gives you a brief sample of that student moved in August 1st, came into our district already outplaced, so we automatically absorb that transitional tuition cost. Students already placed in an out-of-district placement, but they've moved to a home in Westborough. So that's the $89,833 that came in additionally to what I submitted to Christie. So you're looking at $628,833 of unbudgeted funds currently in this fiscal year that we will have to pay. Additionally, we had 2 settlement agreements. Those are one-time payments that come out of working with families to find a mitigation to a cost for an outplacement. And again, they're private legal settlements that are figured out at the table of arbitration to make the best decisions for individual families whose students have complexities that have required us to all come together and try to navigate a way to move forward in the student's education. So those 2 costs, the $41,700 and the $98,728, are one-time costs due this year again in payment. And then currently we're tracking 2 students. We anticipate to be going out of district probably 11-1 and 12-1. Those are the projected costs as soon as we enter into a navigated outplacement with a family. We carry the cost of the anticipated placement, and you're seeing those 2 costs carried now. I'm currently asking, based upon the AFC conversation we had, asked to go back to special education and look at the proration of those 2 numbers to see if they would adjust between now and when school committee votes on Wednesday. So AFC requested that we prorate those tuitions to see, and I didn't know at the time, I apologize when they asked me, those are the current they wanted to know if that was prorated, and I didn't know, against those entry dates as projected, and I told them I wasn't sure, and the answer is those have not been prorated yet, so both of those numbers will adjust against the anticipated entry date of 11-1 and 12-1, which will occur this year. So you're looking at a cluster of numbers that represent current tuition costs that will be paid during this budget cycle, during this year, that are currently not budgeted. So a couple things before I answer any questions. You know that we always have 2 funding streams that come to the town. You have Chapter 70, which we see annually in Christie's numbers because it comes to the town side of the budget, that you see in her operational costs, and you see circuit breaker, which you hear us talk about. We always do the gap slide. Circuit breaker is the funding breaker that you get for tuition-based costs, and it usually runs between 60 to 70%, sometimes 71%, I think it's been the best that I've seen, percent of total costs. So if the state will reimburse you for out-of-district placements to a percentage, but there's always almost a 2-year gap in when you actually get the funds that match against the students you have. So currently, our full circuit breaker available for this year, which is $1,482,801, is fully expended against our anticipated costs, and this is the remaining gap. So when we have to fund the special education budget as a portion of our whole budget, we carry funds for tuition in budget, and we carry the circuit breaker funds given from the state, and the gap is always between tuition placements and those numbers available to us. And you always see us budget for that annually, and we always talk about that number first because it kind of drops into the budget cycle and we budget around it. So those are historically discussions you've had with us annually. You will have it annually as we develop the fiscal year ahead with you. And we will hopefully see when the circuit breaker number comes in, it will respond to these out-of-district placements so that when we build into the future budgets, we should be able to hopefully see some additional funding from the state. I've tried to give you a pretty tight synopsis. I want to finalize just by saying we have over 640 students of our nearly 4,000 students who are special education students. We provide very robust, excellent programming that meets the needs of the wide array of the students that we have that live in our community requiring additional support. I think we're very proud of our programming. You've heard us talk about it. We take pride in the fact that every child who lives in this community deserves the right to be educated in it with their peers, and we build programs around them as requested. And within that number, we have 41 students who require a level of complexity that take them out of our district for their services. We know those are large numbers. My largest out-of-district cost is $302,000, and that's a single placement for a student in residential, as an example, down to some of these numbers you see here in the high 80s, ranging to a more typical out-of-district placement cost. And they fall all across the array of in-between. These numbers are not inclusive of transportation costs, but we do carry in the transportation contract the opportunity to hopefully pick up a portion of that, and then we'll also get reimbursed from the state for a portion. I represent this to you as an anomaly. I recognize the responsibility, as does the school committee, of requesting budget supplemental funds. I think that we feel that this is hopefully a place in our trajectory where the recovery from COVID will hopefully lead us into a place where these kind of placements are usually much more easily anticipated. Some of these, 3 of these are move-ins, so those can happen at any time. Others are students, some that were unanticipated, requiring mental health placements that we weren't able to provide. So I do believe that it represents not a trajectory in our program experience, but an anomaly of the last several years that we want to be responsive to. So I would open it up to questions.
Sean?
So you said 41 out of district. Is that including these 8?
Yes.
Okay, including. Okay.
Well, 11 now, right?
Not the 2, but those are, we always carry them as potentials. I mean, so the numbers, the 41 are captured in the 9 known that we have.
Yeah, right. I had a question, and I asked this, I think, when this was presented at Finance Team, in, I guess it was August, right?
It was last week.
Yeah.
Thursday.
Yeah. But so 3 of the 9 or 3 of the 11 are new move-ins, and agree that there's no way we know moving in that period. For the other 8, those are ones that we were educating here presently. Is there any cost savings for those moving out in terms of teachers, paras, or whatever, that we would have cost savings because now they're moving out, we don't need the staffing to support those?
Not currently. Certainly, we always rotate paras or paraeducators to other locations. That would typically be where you would see a potential cost savings. And across the span of the year, we typically relocate or cluster paras to new students when possible. I don't see, currently, we're understaffed in one program that is carrying a couple of the students that we're working with, so we'd probably do some staff reallocations, but actually the staffing right now is pretty on point even with the transition of these students. Because again, the 8 went out across the span of last year. So between December, when we voted the budget, we had a trajectory of those students heading out of district. So any changes to the staffing we did when we staffed in the summer. So the only area where you would pick up, and the 9th student was never here, already was outplaced, moved, the parents, the family relocated, but the student's already in a private placement. So the only 2 where we would pick up potential buffer would be 10 and 11, and we're already anticipating potential ways that we can utilize that staff to fill some gaps. Again, those outplacements will, transitionally happen. There's one of the problems is an escalation of wait lists that are happening based upon the last several of years, and
students waiting for placements, and sometimes in the time that we've had students waiting for placements, we've built programming around them, or we were able to stabilize them and able to keep them in district. Sometimes that will give us, again, more years with a family as a child grows through different aspects of skills and, you know, struggles they're working on. So it's a pretty volatile cycle in terms of finances. Not typically visible in a way that comes forward for this level of kind of micro discussion, because we carry that 3-month stabilization of prepay and make those adjustments internally. So, you know, again, it's kind of the private work of managing students.
Yeah, so one more question.
Sure.
So when we get to town meeting, I know, and we saw this last year, it's difficult to move the request in terms of the amount. And I think, in 2 weeks, we're expected to sign off on the warrant. We're going to close the
Right.
warrant. So I guess in 2 weeks' time, do you feel confident that you'll have a final number?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do. Currently, we're looking to get the prorated numbers and an update on the 2 students that we're anticipating will go out, and that would be the change. The other numbers are fixed, the settlements are done and settled, and the others are currently encumbered costs for the year. So the numbers are fixed other than the 2, and I will bring a fixed number to school committee. We wanted to gather your feedback. School committee felt strongly that they had a split vote on the number and didn't actually, because one of our members is out of town, so they actually had a stalemate of a 2-2 vote. It was a fascinating meeting and one worth viewing. A really robust discussion around the quality of making sure that all of the boards have an inclusive opportunity to participate in giving the school committee feedback. So the discussion centered on making sure that I was standing here in front of you to receive your feedback, and that we had an opportunity to be with AFC before they make their final vote. So this will refine our projected final number and what any motions would look like and what the number would be. They will vote on Wednesday, and so you would have it before you're closing the warrant. So they have their school committee, we have our school committee Wednesday, which is like the 21st.
Great. Steve, you had a comment, it sounds like. Yep.
I just wanted to point out something that isn't usual. I think when we or anybody goes before town meeting, the option of whether or not this amount of money has to be paid. This is a state law. These services are required. This money is already encumbered, as Amber said. We will have to pay it for the services that are required here. So the difference relative to town meeting is if the money is not voted by town meeting and there is no other relief, this money is already being removed from the budget that was created at the annual town meeting, and therefore this service will be paid for, and the only other place that, in fact, we can balance the budget, as it were, is to reduce staff, since 85% of the school department's budget is staff. And what that means is, since this service has to be paid, that means that the general services to the rest of the students in town would otherwise be affected. And so I think it's important that you understand that we have to pay this money. It's already been allocated, if you will, by state law, and it comes right off the top. It's no different than a settlement against the town relative to the Board of Selectmen that comes right off the cherry sheet before you do anything else. So for us, it's important that the town understand that the impact of this would be on the other part of the services that we supply to the town, i.e. the general students in the population. And so the presentation that's made here is as transparent as we can make it, that unfortunately, based on the way the laws are written for the school department, these services have to be provided. And although we talked about different numbers, our thought is that we would come to town meeting with whatever we believe will be the numbers that we have to pay, whether it's you know, the 628 plus the 41.7 and the 91.7, for sure, we know we owe that. And as Amber said, that we would prorate the others based on whatever amount of money we need, and that's what we would bring to town meeting. Our hope is that the article amount before you settle on fixing the warrant is that amount of money, because it is due and will have to be paid. So it's not an option, if you will, in terms of paying for this service. It must be done, and therefore it's different than the option of the town saying, yes, we will provide for some capital expenditure for the school department, or for that matter, anybody else in town. So it's important, I think, that that's understood of what happens if the town meeting doesn't raise this money, whatever amount we ask for. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Patrick?
Yeah, thank you, Steve and Amber, for bringing this forward. I understand you're in a rock in a hard place, so to speak, here legally. And I think, Steve, you answered part of my question. You know, I think about the 85% just mentioned. That's a number of teachers that would be impacted here. So would it be exclusively a reduction in force? Is that what would be impacted, or are there other services that might also be impacted by this?
I mean, I would say that, I mean, I'm going to move forward to town meeting anticipating that this funding will be provided, and if it isn't, then we circle up a whole giant group of people internally and start, I mean, Dave and I are already doing a series of projections, which is our fiscal responsibility, and we will always try to keep student impact as far away as possible. But, you know, it's a complexity of equity. It really is. I mean, in the sense that we have never in Westborough held up the needs to provide for students who require a great deal of service from those who are able to move through the services we provide depthly and do well and enjoy their schooling in different ways that are services that are more stable. You know, I think this is where you see some communities, as we said at AFC, play student needs against each other. We've never done that in Westborough. We've always had a projection of providing a public school experience for all students that is robust and equitable to their needs. And I think it's kept us from, you know, making mistakes that you see in some communities where, you know, they cut things that make people feel like they're at odds with each other. And I think we would be trying to avoid all of that.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Sure.
Shelby?
Thank you. Amber, I believe you've covered this, but I do have a couple questions. So you mentioned that, I think you said this may be an anomaly in terms of, I mean, we'd like to believe so. I'm not going to hold you to it, but seeing this number of students outplaced, I just don't recall what the trends have been over like the last 2 or 3 years.
No, it's an excellent question. I mean, again, I do believe that we have very differentiated and robust programming provided for special education students. And again, to see, you know, certainly I'm heading into my 9th year. I've never had an experience of this number of students impacting a transition that we weren't able to anticipate that number. And certainly I know Steve spoke at AFC and said I think he's done 12 or more years with school committee and hasn't experienced this. So I do see it as an anomaly. If it were to become a trend, it would represent something, you know, different in our planning, and it would have financial impacts that would be problematic. We've always centered our planning on students should be schooled in their community, and the programming we need will come to them, and that's stood us in good shape. So I do see it as an anomaly, but certainly, you know, now there's a cascading impact to the fact that for years we had that stabilization roll forward to keep the ability to navigate unanticipated $200,000 worth of transitional change. And so, you know, it's going to change our budget projections as we work forward, certainly for FY24.
And the tuition numbers that are represented here, excluding student 10 and 11, those are 100%, right?
Encumbered.
Encumbered, okay. And just help me to, I apologize, because I'm not following what's in our draft 2 of the warrant where it's requested 539. I
Right.
see that at the top line, and then, so
Sure.
is the actual
The actual
shortfall
is- yep,
closer
go
to
ahead.
$1 million?
And 937?
Yeah, if you add up
Okay,
the
I just
whole
want to make
thing,
sure,
yes, yeah.
I didn't see any minuses on the board, so I just wanted to
Well,
make sure I
think too-
was.
Yeah, I know, they're staggering numbers, I agree.
Yes, they
I
really
mean,
are.
Again, when you look at, this is why Westborough has built internal programming that can absorb some of these
Mhm.
transitions, because it can be one student, like I said, you have the
300,000, like you said.
Right,
Yeah.
in a blink, so. So the number that I submitted, the 539 is at the top. Those
Yep.
were the 8 known students that transitioned out through the span of the year. The 9th student was a move-in. So the actual number that I brought forward for discussion was the 628, 833 to school committee in kind of tiered discussion. The number that I sent to Christy, again, we only send money for students we have. We don't build in
Yep.
potentials. And so when I sent it in August, I didn't have that one known yet. So,
In the 3-month buffer, so to speak, I'm not using the right language, but the 3-month buffer that you spoke to was utilized last year
to pay as
for.
those students transitioned out.
Because they transitioned out last,
They
that was going to be
the
my
8
question. I think I
transitioned
understand
across
now.
the span of the year after we,
Some of those 8.
between January and the end of the year, all of those 8
All of those 8.
transitioned.
Okay.
And so we waited until we closed out the budget and waited to see if we had any opportunities to draw forward any prepay that we could use to cut into that 539. We're coming into the year with 0. So the full 539 was submitted in the warrant request
Yep.
as Christie called for them, and then the next placement was added. The 2 settlements, those are one-time payments and will be closed at the end of the year when because they're settlements. They're not, some settlements go for multiple years. These are, they might like prorate a shared cost over multiple years. This is one time, the 130, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's okay, 130 and change.
431, the 2 settlements, those are one time. And then the other 2 numbers will prorate down and take in probably 2 months off of both of them.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Christine has a.
Yep. Christie?
When we're talking about the funding sources, you mentioned that this would cascade into FY '24, understanding that the majority of the numbers you have up here, I think, we would consider operational expenses, and
Right.
that they'll continue. But given the one-time settlement agreements,
Yeah.
we've had a conversation, does it make sense to pull those out, being one-time payments, similar to what we discussed with the DPW, to lower that raise and appropriate number by the 130 within 2 articles? So a free cash article for the one-time and then raise and appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I think the strategic logic of this kind of discussion is exactly what we sought for input from AFC, and we're seeking from you. We're all charged with both the responsibility of these students who live in our community while also mitigating the impact to our taxpayers and to other students in our district. So I certainly think that's a viable option for us to consider. We could cull out the motion so that it has 2 pieces to it. Do the 2 numbers from free cash, and then, I mean, I could clean up the request if again, we have 2 members here and the others will get a debrief, and then pull the prorated amount into the total request for raise and appropriate. Would probably, but they have to discuss that. They had a split discussion about whether or not they wanted more information on students 9 and 10. Are they accepted and are we waiting for a spot and that's the projected enrollment, or are you trying to get them into a place? So there's stages to
9 and
this.
10 or 10 or 11?
I'm sorry, 10 and
Okay,
11.
okay.
So the school committee sent me back for some information, and I anticipate some movement in 10 and 11 in that number, and then they need to take into consideration your thoughts and AFC, and then shape it into their final vote on Wednesday.
So to that point, Amber, 10 and 11 are anticipated but not known. If that funding was not put through or not, or held back, you didn't request it,
Yeah.
but they do go through as planned.
Yeah.
You would have to
Make other
make
cuts, yeah.
other cuts to fund that.
And typically during the school year, that 3-month prepay would have helped with those types of absorbed differences, as well as the 100,000 we used to hold out. We have none of those, so, sorry. I think David just texted me. I have like all these people watching. Let's see what David says. Oh, he was sending me he was doing a breakdown to cluster these dollars for you. I won't slow
Don't
us
confuse
down.
us
I
with
know you can
numbers.
do the math.
I'm glad it wasn't a student 12.
David's already thinking, well, I think he heard Christie say we could resort it, so he just resorted it and sent me the table. Thank you very much. So he's following the discussion so we can bring it forward to the committee next week.
So for FY '24, would we potentially begin to see offsets to some of these?
So we'll wait till we see what the circuit breaker number will be, and then we'll also see what the total tuition, what the total budget is. I mean, we try to push things onto grants. Like, that's a process that we'll all be participating in as we move forward. We used to carry a lot more of this type of cost on one of our grants, the IDEA grant, but we've put staffing on that over the years because it keeps that salary number down in the budget. I mean, so again, it's all going to pool into the same kind of opportunity to do offsets and to keep the overall ask as, tight as possible. So I think we're also really tracking FY, again, '23 to try to make sure we hold, like we've already tried to put out some notes to like hold off on purchasing for any buildings and grounds, anything they do during the year, like slow down on supplies. We won't make any, we usually carry, I think we carry in our budget 30,000 for furniture across the whole district. Like right now, we're like, we won't spend that. So we start pulling those earmarks to manage like any unknowns, because these are the current ones, but somebody could move in. So, I mean, again, like those are the type of operational risks that come with these kind of big numbers.
One final question.
Sure.
Let's say one final. Those students 1 through 8 that were movements out last year, and you mentioned a little bit about COVID and mental health, whatever. Any thoughts or chances that some of those may move back in in future years?
No, that's a great question. And the answer is yes. I mean, we, over the past several years with our development of programming and interacting with private settings where they provide a stabilization, it depends on the package of what things a child is needing to work through. Mental health is typically one where we're able to work with families over time, stabilize students. They continue to grow and stabilize. We work in partnership, and we're able to often bring those students back into programming. I think, and you see that in the kind of ebb and flow of tuition placements, where you also have students that age out, like at 22, and so we track a 5-year rotational cycle of when we know a tuition will close out if they didn't come back, and if they come back, we rotate it back into the stabilization fund and carry it and use it as that part of budgeting to try to manage the internal costs. So some years you'll see, that's why that every once in a while when we do that gap between the circuit breaker and what we're carrying in tuition costs, it'll go up and down, because it might be that we've had students come back and our overall costs adjusted, but then your circuit breaker goes down. So it's an ongoing kind of.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I mean, it kind of, I know, Alan, I see your hand raised just quickly. Shelby, it came to your question about on anomaly, whatever, and I guess related to Christie's thing. And Christy and Leah, close your ears here. But thinking about the same thing, is there more here that potentially that we look at these, if they're anomalies? I know they're operating expense, and she's glaring at me, but is there...
I interrupt you too.
Yeah. Potential that this doesn't go to the taxpayer and that we can offset more of this with free cash as an anomaly because of things that have happened. I know you can't predict that, but
Can I just ask a question? I mean, when you say the word anomaly, that sounds like one time, but I think the anomaly is the number of students over
Right.
that time, but they're going to continue to hit
Right.
your budget as an operating
Right.
expense for
And
the length of
several
their
of those
education.
8 are young. So I would hope that we will return them at some point, but you're looking at several year placements. So they are budgetary and continuing.
But I guess we're going back to Shelby's thing is, part of the issue we have this year is that we used up some of that buffer. Shelby used it, and you had a better word for it, and I forgot it too, so.
Well, it's a type of stabilization account.
Stabilization, yeah. That was used up last year because we had those move out in the last 6 months of the year, in anticipating that, I guess the question would be, will we have that, will we have that next year if we don't have them moving out? Or
Hopefully, yes. I mean, it depends. I mean, again, budget cycles are individual to the impacts of the year,
Right.
because last year we had a variety of things that impacted that, as well as, unanticipated electrical and plumbing costs, which were very high last year for us. And again, like, I think year to year, those numbers vary. We were subcontracting out that work, and it was very expensive last year. So our buildings and grounds budget was over, and so had to be, closed out at zero as well. So year to year, you might see some changes. I certainly will be working with David to anticipate one. I mean, again, it's too early to talk about 24. I got to get through opening where we are. We're certainly doing those projections. I think, again, I do represent it as the transition of the anomaly, but the continued operational cost of what that impact will be is here. And that's why we understand the magnitude of it and why it's an important discussion, but why it's operational cost. Other than, I think, insightfully pulling the two settlement agreements to free cash would be smart.
Yeah, and I guess, again, I'm trying to be creative and thinking of, if you hadn't had those 8 move out last year, you would have had that buffer of a certain amount, whatever you said, 200 or 300. And if using that last year was kind of a anomaly, one-time thing, is there, again, a piece of this that can be considered a one-time thing versus an ongoing operating expense? So it stays out of budget, paid for free cash, doesn't hit tax base. So it just, again, some things to think about. I don't know all the details here. Sorry, I didn't really that wasn't a question. It was just my
You're thinking
rambling,
out
so I
loud.
apologize.
That's okay. That's why we're
Yeah.
here. For
I know
that
Alan
kind
had
of
a question,
discussion.
so I
Yeah.
kept him from asking it.
Thank you. So not really a question, more of a comment. I mean, I think the anomaly is that, there was a 28% jump in the number of outplacement students over the course of the year. And, as I think back to the chart, I see really 3 different budgetary needs. The first group is students 1 through 9, because those are outplacements. We know they're outplacements. At this point, there's no indication that it wouldn't be for the full year, or potentially multiple years. The second group is the funding group is the settlements, which is a one-time expense. I'm very supportive of using free cash for that, and encourage the school committee to consider that in preparing the warrant articles and work with the town manager and the finance team on that. And then it's students 10 and 11 where it's anticipated, it's expected, it's in process right now. Maybe we have more information and it becomes a definitive known, by our next meeting or when we have to close the warrant. Maybe we don't. So I hear Ian's point about is some of the, that 539 plus the 90 really for students 1 through 9, could that be considered non-operational or not? I'm not sure about that. I did watch the portion of the school committee meeting where they discussed this, as well as the AFC meeting. And so the discussion around multiple tiers and what should be in the warrant really is how much additional funding specific to these needs versus how much do we want to really force cuts in other areas of the school budget. And again, appreciate Amber's comments about the goal is always to keep it as far away from student impact as possible, and certainly never want to get into a situation where any group of parents or families or students see students with more complex needs as the fiscal enemy. And so I appreciate the process to help avoid that from happening and prevent that from happening as well. So I guess I would encourage my fellow select board members to watch those couple hours of video. It'll be time well spent to get a sense of the different levels. And what's in the back of my mind is really a fourth bucket of money, which is we don't know what's going to happen during the year as far as additional move-ins or additional needs that come up. And we don't have that buffer either. And so, my concern is if, we underfund, the need now, we're potentially exacerbating a problem later on in the school year because we don't, that stabilization fund is empty and, the school budget didn't include the $100,000 safety net. So those are just sort of my comments on the process and where we are right now.
Thanks, Alan. Other questions or comments from?
So Alan, are you suggesting in that last comment that I don't know if this can be done, but the ask at town meeting is the 930,000 plus building back to buffer?
I'm not sure if I'm asking that far. I guess my feedback.
I mean, I understand where the logic of that. I don't know if fiscally that
I don't
makes
know
sense.
if we look to build back that 100,000 buffer or not in the ask. I guess, in any given year, the school department has the ability to do some absorbing. And Amber's indicated that some absorbing is there. I guess, my feedback to the school committee is ask for and propose the money that's needed. Right? And that before we start cutting services or reallocating funds within before the school department, the school committee reallocate funds between programs and services and, defer, maintenance or, furniture, other things like that. Ask for the money ask for the money we believe we need now, knowing that we could still see other unanticipated costs during the fiscal year, during the school year, and then that's where you'd start to, do the shuffling. I think if we start shuffling, or if we ask the school committee in the school department to start shuffling money now, and we have additional unanticipated costs, then, that effort for those new unanticipated costs started at a place of great disadvantage.
Thanks.
So that parallels the discussion that school committee was tracking, and there were two branches that led to that split vote. I don't need to replay it, but they looked at, we've always only budgeted for students that we know we have in seats, and so that's where the split was just around one, again, the quality of discussion, so everybody has an opportunity to understand the complexity and the responsibility in the sense that these are shared town resident responsibilities for these students, and, we need to make shared decisions when we can around all of this. And they wanted more information on known and anticipated costs around 10 and 11. We've made good progress on that. I believe I can carry this back to them and debrief, the conversation we heard here. And I think if you have other questions, you can email me or, reach out to school committee members, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
And watch AFC too, as you recommended.
It's kind of a version of the same conversation we've had. They're all playing through each other in different versions. I know Christie's, I think, listened to all of them. So if I'm off point, somebody tells me something we forgot. But in general, I think we covered it.
Perfect. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Amber, thank you.
Thank you very much, as always. I look forward to our shared work. All right, take care.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, and slightly ahead of schedule, but I think looks like folks are here, is the library building. So item 6 on our agenda, library building project and warrant articles.
I think I'm all set. Good evening, Maureen Amiot, 6 Arch Street, Library Director. I just wanted to introduce some of the folks who are here for the presentation tonight. This is Mary Johnston, Chair of the Library Trustees. We also have John Lemieux from Vertex, our Owner's Project Manager, Eric Moore from Lamoureux Pagano Architects, our designer, and a whole team of people from Fontaine Brothers, who are our construction manager that just came on board last week or week before. So I brought the entourage. I know you're all familiar with our project, so I want to give a quick, very high-level overview of how we got to where we are today. Some of you have more of the details than others, but I thought it would be helpful for people watching or others in the audience who may not be as aware of our project. So in 2012, a needs assessment showed that the library was undersized for our then current and future population. Our state agency, the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, or MBLC, which you'll hear me refer to a lot tonight, announced a grant for planning and design for construction and renovation of libraries in 2013. We applied for and were awarded a planning and design grant in 2014, and the result was a document called the Building Program, which describes the library that Westborough wants and needs. It was based on focus groups, surveys, demographics, and other population data. The MBLC then announced construction grants in 2016 to implement libraries' building programs. We applied in early 2017, and we were notified that summer that we would be receiving a grant, but we were placed at number 11 on a waiting list. In July of 2021, we moved to the top of the waiting list, and we began work on a refresh of the earlier design and a new cost estimate. We reformed our library building committee last October. The committee selected a new owner's project manager in January of this year. We applied for construction manager at risk as a delivery method for the project in April, and were notified in May that that application was approved. Our $9.4 million provisional grant was awarded by the MBLC in July. You may remember how excited we were, the big fuss. That award started the clock. The MBLC requires the town to approve and fund the project within 6 months of the award. That's why it is a provisional grant and why it's appearing on the fall town meeting warrant. We then began the process to hire our construction manager, which consisted of a pre-qualification phase, an invitation to submit proposals, interviews, and then the selection and the award. That process just concluded at the end of August with the selection of Fontaine Brothers, and we're delighted to have them on board. The team at Fontaine began work immediately to create their own cost estimate and reconcile it with the one created by the design team. We received the updated design in August and the updated cost estimate just last Friday. The next few slides will give you a preview of the new design that was just completed. And one thing I want to note for all of you and for anyone who's watching who's not familiar with seeing construction renderings, this is a rendering. It doesn't represent the actual color of the building materials. I want to assure everyone that the existing granite facade will remain the same, and it will be the same color. It looks white on this picture, and a resident who I had seen this thought we were going to paint the building, and I want to assure you we're not going to do that. So the renovated library will feature a new side entrance on Parkman Street with a ramp and stairs leading to the door. A covered porch will allow for outdoor seating and for outdoor programming. Above the covered porch is an enclosed outdoor children's space that is located off of the new upstairs children's department. The new children's department, as I said, will be relocated to the top floor and will feature early literacy areas, interactive technology, and large windows with lots of natural light. Westborough history will be woven into the design, like this concept of an early literacy, the concept of a seating/early literacy play area for young children that honors Westborough's history as a transportation hub. In the back left of this drawing is a space that could be used for STEM programming and hands-on activities featuring interactive technology. And the children's patio area would be a 3-season space that is fully enclosed. It could be used for story times, for craft programs, or just a fun space for reading, playing, and discovering the outdoors. Books and materials for adults would be located on the main and lower levels. The larger, more flexible meeting room is located at the back of this area with access to the covered porch. Study rooms, which have been a request from the community for years, will be added, along with small conference rooms. Much to the delight of residents, restrooms will be added on every floor. New electric-powered heating and air conditioning systems are planned, and electrical and data infrastructure will be improved. Our teens will have a larger, more appropriate space in the lower level in proximity to the rest of the adult materials. Staff will also have a work area on the lower floor, and storage, which is badly needed, is added as well. The historic 1908 building will have a full interior renovation to restore woodwork, replace windows that are rotting, and replace the roof. The Westborough Center for History and Culture will get a larger space in the 1908 building and will have an archival space intentioned to preserve and improve the library, a showpiece on West Main Street, and add an addition that blends with the old in a way that honors the beauty of the existing building and incorporates Westborough's past, present, and future. So to move on to what you're really wanting to know about is the costs. Our designers and our construction manager just finished their reconciliation this past Friday, and the new cost estimate for the project is $36,698,556. With the $9.4 million state grant, this would leave approximately $27.3 million that would have to come from the town or other sources. The overall cost is about a 54% increase from the 2016 estimate. I've talked with the other waitlisted libraries as recently as this afternoon, and that increase is in line with their estimated cost increases. So it's a statewide increase that we're seeing. It's important to note, as I've explained before, that the state grant has not changed and will not change. The MBLC grants are for a fixed amount that's based on our 2016 cost estimate. As you can see here, the most impactful component of this cost is construction. The 2022 construction estimate is from our construction manager that we brought on this summer. They have the expertise and the incentive to make this estimate as accurate as possible. It's also been checked, confirmed, and reconciled with a separate independent estimate done by the design team. We feel this is a conservative estimate, meaning that we expect that the actual costs will be somewhat lower. The entire project team will do our utmost to keep costs below this estimate, and we know that there are opportunities at later stages in the process for things like value engineering and other grants that could reduce the final cost. Our OPM and designer can address the methods used to determine these numbers in a few minutes if you would like to know more. So why now? Westborough's population in 1980, at the time of the last renovation, was 13,619. We're now at 21,499 and projected to continue growing over the coming decades. In 1980, we didn't have cell phones, internet, Wi-Fi, or libraries of things. We had card catalogs and we loaned books. Our services and the desires and expectations of our community, and even the way people use libraries, have changed dramatically in that time. Libraries are no longer silent, dusty book warehouses, but are now dynamic, busy community hubs where people come to meet each other, learn new things, create, search for jobs, and sometimes even work using our Wi-Fi and computers. And yes, they still read. Libraries are the one place people can go in a community where they aren't expected to buy anything. Everyone is welcome, no matter what age, and you can stay as long as you want. With that said, there are a number of issues that need to be addressed with the existing library. Our space needs study in 2012 called out a few specific areas that were deficient in regards to the amount of space. The current teen space is directly across from a quiet reading room, so you can imagine the issues that that might cause. The space only holds about 10 students at a time, so all of our classes and events for teens end up being held either in our meeting room or outdoors or in other locations in the building. Teens who want to come in and study have to contend with other teens who want to work collaboratively on a project, for example, so a bigger multi-purpose space is desperately needed. The other space I'll note is the children's department, which also needs additional space. Our population of children has grown tremendously since the 1980 edition was built, but so has the body of research about early literacy and brain development. Mr. Rogers famously said, "Play is the work of children," and our children need a space that fosters early literacy through manipulatives, toys, and programs geared for their specific needs. With regard to the structure of the building, there are several issues I want to point out as well. The windows in the building that we've talked about before, in the old building, are the original single-pane windows that were installed in 1908. The exterior wood sills are rotted and are held together right now with putty and paint. We were approved for replacement windows several years ago at town meeting, but we opted to return the funds to the town and wait for the construction grant to help pay for them. We can no longer open most of them, and if we do, we can't get them closed easily again. The putty and paint is really a Band-Aid fix, and the windows are in dire need of replacement. Our electrical structure is inadequate for a modern library as well. When the addition was built in 1980, we didn't need to charge our mobile devices or use computers the way we do now. In our staff and public areas, we sought help from an electrician to safely link power strips together in order to run all the computers we need. It's not ideal, but it was the only way we could get electricity where it was needed due to the lack of outlets. The center area of the adult section where study tables are located has no power whatsoever. Our plans for the new building include electrifying our heating and cooling systems to meet the requirements of the Climate Action Plan. This means replacement of our gas-powered boiler you see on this slide and our 1980s era fan coil units that are in place throughout the building. Our data infrastructure is also inadequate for a modern library. Our staff computers are hardwired for speed and security, but our Wi-Fi signal is inadequate at best. Library users would like us to be able to live stream events like lectures and demonstrations, but we don't have the bandwidth. The architecture of the building prevents a strong signal being carried from the top floor where our equipment is located to all points throughout the building. We don't have a wire closet or a server room. Instead, our data cabling and hardware sits on a tabletop and runs through a cardboard box into an opening in the wall. People working from home, students doing homework and research, and residents looking for videos or music need a much more robust signal than what we currently can offer. So some have said, why not just fix the library as it is? Well, fixing things like the windows, upgrading the electrical system, installing an ADA-compliant elevator, or replacing the 116-year-old slate roof and fixing structural issues would require us to come into full compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act and to bring the entire building fully up to code. Repairs of this nature are not eligible for grant funding from the MBLC. When we applied for our grant in 2017, an outside review panel of architects, project managers, and library directors who had done projects in the past reviewed our application. They agreed with us that it was worthwhile and necessary and funded it at an amount of $9.4 million. This grant is a once-in-a-generation or possibly once-in-a-lifetime chance for us as a town to have the opportunity to rethink the way we offer library services for the next 40 to 50 years. It will allow us to continue to be innovative in the way we offer services to the community, with enough space for public events, meetings, study space, and outdoor space needed by residents. Passing on the grant funds would mean waiting years for another grant opportunity while costs continue to increase, or doing the repairs piecemeal and having to come back again and again for repairs and small projects. The building as it stands today needs significant work, and with $9.4 million coming from the state, this is the time to do it. On this slide, we've compared the cost of the full renovation with what we're calling Plan B, which would be the essential renovations needed to keep the library functional in compliance with ADA and current building codes and in the existing building for years ahead. I want to underscore the fact that this project is not an A or B scenario. Our grant is tied completely to the renovation and addition, and that is the project that we're bringing forward at town meeting. But we know that residents, select board, finance committee, and ourselves as the building committee and trustees wanted to know what the cost might be if we just did the base repair. We asked our architect to evaluate what would need to be done and provide a very rough, very high-level order of magnitude cost estimate for the work. They were hired to design a renovation and addition for us, not to do base repair, so this is a very general, high-level look at what it might cost. And as you can see, the essential repairs and renovation are costly. Again, we wouldn't be able to use our current state grant to help, and the MBLC will not fund basic renovations, repairs like this now or in the future. If the town does not approve the full renovation, the library will need repairs, and what we'll end up doing is scrapping the current plans, which is 10 years of work, and determine whether to do them piecemeal or all at once over the next few years. Our $9.4 million will be forfeited and will be awarded to another municipality. This project is not going to get any less expensive if we wait. The Library Building Committee and trustees realize this is a big project coming at a time of historic inflation, but it may be our only chance to access MBLC grant funds, improve our library, and give our residents the library they want, need, and deserve to have. There's a child who isn't even born yet, who's going to be amazed at what they see when he or she walks into the new children's department in a few years and sees all there is to offer. I personally cannot wait for that moment, and I hope you can all be there with me to see it too. Thank you for giving us the time tonight, and we're ready for questions.
Great, thank you. Questions from the board?
Sure.
Shelby?
Yeah, I'll kick things off. Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation and for everyone being here. first question I had that was new, so thank you for showing us the rendering. Is the 3-season concept, explain that, please.
Can you come up? Can you come up to the mic?
And maybe it would be helpful, just as we're following along, if you could go to that slide, please.
So the children's area is on the third floor.
Could you just
And-
introduce yourself?
I'm
Just-
Eric Moore from Lamoureux Pagano Architects.
Thank you.
Designers. So the children's area is on the third floor. That's a very secure location, one of the reasons it's up there. But it didn't have the ability to connect to an outside space. You know, you had to go down a set of stairs to the main level, exit the building. There wasn't that back and forth. So what we did was to create a pretty much a covered porch, if you will, on the third floor. And it would be totally screened in with heavy mesh guardrail type thing, so that there would be no possibility of a child getting out and over the edge of it or anything like that. So, but it would be open to the outside air. It would, we propose a skylight, if you can see in the rendering, to let natural light in, and it would connect to their program room, so it could be opened up with a sliding glass door and kind of serve as an extension of the program room in good weather.
Thank you. So a bit granular, please stay up, a bit granular on this question, but there's certainly snow and wind. So how is that managed in this proposal, being that it's on the third floor?
The floor would be built as a plaza deck. It would have concrete pavers on the top, and underneath that it would have layers of, they would be up on pedestals, and then there would be layers of insulation and a roofing system, a membrane roofing system, very heavy duty, tied into roof drains that would pick up the any snow or ice or wind-swept rain that came into that space. Only a portion of it is actually over an occupied, conditioned part of the building. The rest is over the front entry, which is just covered outside space as well.
Okay, thank you. And Maureen, or whomever, could you remind us of the additional square footage increase from current to proposed?
Correct me if I'm wrong.
And when I say that, meaning usable, or however you calculate it.
We're increasing the square footage approximately 10,000 square feet. So we're adding another floor level where the.
And what's the percent?
It's going from in the vicinity of 26,000 square feet to about 36, I believe. I can.
We're currently at 20.
20, okay.
We're currently 20.
Okay.
I'll hunt that down and report back.
Okay. And the
So it's
other,
about 30.
the other important part to be aware of when you're thinking about square footage, we're removing the 1980 addition and adding the new addition in the back. So our net is going to be an addition of the number of square feet that Eric will tell us in a minute, but they'll be constructing much more than that. Does that make sense?
No.
Do you know what I mean?
I mean, I know about the levels, but just explain that again.
So they're going to take off the 1980 addition.
Yep.
So we lose all of that square footage, but then they're building a 3-story addition in the back. So we're going to we're losing the 2 stories. They're
Yep.
going to build
yeah.
3.
Sorry, yes.
So,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah, so just for my part, I mean, I think that, well, timing is everything in life, and, coming out of COVID and all the increases that we've heard with respect to whether it's ambulances or student tuitions or what have you, it's difficult to kind of swallow this kind of increase or contemplate it. But our library is a multi-generational center. It's heavily used by residents. I would argue probably the most diverse population of any facility other than maybe the schools and services that the town offers. I don't think it makes any sense, although I am very appreciative of the thought that went into the providing the numbers of kind of renovate and base repairs versus fix versus renovate. So I appreciate that transparency, but I think that would be a complete waste of money. I want to acknowledge the extensive work that the library trustees and now the building committee and certainly the professionals we're working with of the process that's been followed. It's been, I think you said we started this survey back in 2012. I was part of that process right around that time as I joined the library trustees, and one of the things this board and in our community and the voters challenge us with is, have we followed the process? What grants have we applied for, et cetera, et cetera. And if there's a process that has been followed and homework that's been done, it's this one. So I'm very appreciative of that. While I wish the state were much more flexible in recognizing the costs and for the public's benefit in our packet, there was a summary, it wasn't shown here tonight, but I do think maybe it's on the library website, of the comparative costs that have gone up of other projects. That was illustrated for us, and it's astounding. So we're not unique in this, and no one else is getting those increases, although I don't know if we want to talk about the letter to the...
I think Maureen's going to talk about
Okay,
that later.
all right, well, that's her show, so I'll,
I
but-
didn't want to add that to this part of the presentation,
Sure.
because that's a separate
Okay,
discussion, but
okay.
we'll talk about that
Okay,
next.
all right, sorry to steal your thunder. But the services that the library offers, I'll just wrap it up, are what residents want and what I think they deserve living here. I think they're equivalent to what we aspire. What we've done with our existing services are amazing in our structure and staff, and they've been extremely creative, and I would expect that to continue, but in new and innovative ways. But this is representative of the type of service, from basic bathrooms and accessibility and technology to, the kind of more dreamy, fun things that I'm sure will be the final product. I'm fully supportive of this, and I hope that the rest of the community will be with a strong turnout of vote and support. Thank you.
Thanks, Shelby. Actually, I just had a couple questions going on Shelby's, because I had a similar thing about this, and I think the answer to the first one, because I didn't remember this on here. It sounds like this is new in this kind of design piece now, this kind of outdoor
Yes.
area.
That is new, based on design review that we had with our consultant at the MBLC, that one of the things that they're encouraging libraries to do in their renovations as a result of COVID is to build in usable outdoor space for programming, so that if we ever have a situation where we can't, for whatever reason, gather indoors in groups, that we have suitable outdoor space that we can use for programming.
Great.
Maureen. And so in looking upon that, our architects were cognizant of the library being downtown and looking at the other houses on Parkman Street, and a lot of them have the traditional porches, and so they were looking at ways to honor that historical part of downtown, and thought the covered porch idea was a great way to incorporate that into the library to help it blend into the community.
Great, thank you. And I may have missed this, but what is the size of this outdoor space, kind of square footage wise?
Could you tell me the number?
Oh, the total square footage of the building is 32,500.
And then the floor is how big?
Sorry, asking all these questions.
It's about 22, it's about 600 square feet approximately.
Okay. Couple questions. So with this change and other changes, I mean, I guess trying to consider, cost increases, is it comparable if we just went with the old design, trying to compare apples and apples here, or how much is changed in the cost estimate because of new design features or whatever, or is it pretty comparable based on old design? So are we looking at apples and costs, or is some of that escalation caused by?
No, I would say we are. we've shifted things around. One of the issues we had was we were in very close proximity to a property line, the rear property line, and we knew that was something we'd have to address, or we'd incur some extraordinary costs to actually build with that condition. So we ended up increasing that rear yard to approximately between 10 to 14 feet, and the space that was in there moved into the further along Parkman Street, so it became kind of the main entrance area that you see here. So we haven't significantly changed the square footage. I think we reduced the program in one area, but we added some of the small meeting rooms. So I would say yes, we're
And we
apples to
can't,
apples.
right? I don't,
Right.
go ahead, Sarge.
Yeah, so the proposal that was put forward in 2016 effectively was what was approved by the MBLC, and so you can maybe do some shading on it, but really, they're saying, we're giving you the money for that, and so we'll let you make some minor changes, but really, and so that's why when the costs go way up, some of these people are like, okay, what can we do? Well, hey, if you
Your
want the
grant's
money,
based on that.
there's only so much you can change, right? So,
Correct.
and that's part of the reason why we went with an OPM and a construction manager at risk on this project, so we can try and manage it more closely. A lot of these other towns, looking at their projects, aren't using that process, and so they're just sort of re-quoting exactly what they had before.
Just to add, we've been in very close contact with MBLC, Lauren Starr and Andrea Bonabunker, through the process, and have gotten their input on designs. They had an active role. They are aware of what we've proposed. They've seen all of the design and programming changes that have been made, and they are I would say they're on board. I think we're in good shape with MBLC.
Just as the trustees and the library building committee, our first task was, we went back to MBLC and said, can you up the grant, and can we shave the project? And the answers to both of those are no.
Yeah.
So we tried.
Yeah. No, that's it's a great answer. It's just, seeing this and that this is a part of it, what else change components? I mean, there's the small things, which I like bringing the historic piece in. I guess this piece, absolutely understand it, but then I sit there and say, now you got 600 square feet of unusable space for portions of the year because it's open, and to the point of snow, rain, really humid, hot sun comes through. I mean, I'm not sure what temperature control that. I guess the question is there any, and it's probably increased cost, but cheap ways to, have those sliders that come across or something to close out that outdoor space so it's more usable in a 4-season fashion versus a 3-season. Again, just questions that may come up in town meeting of, we're creating and space, and I understand the downtown setting, understand I am not going to, disagree with I'm not a expert on the childhood stuff, and the open space stuff makes sense to me. It makes sense to me with what we've come through in COVID. But it just kind of sticks about building a space that's building space, not when they talk outdoor space. If you were someplace else, you put, outdoor yards and covered things, whatever. So,
I would agree, Ann.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it, and I understand the purpose of the third floor for the kids, and I understand the safety, or, can imagine the safety issues. But I also feel like there's a potential for, and we all became very tolerant of eating outside with cold food in COVID, but I think that our appetite, no pun intended, has waned for that, right? Now we're kind of like, okay, let's not do that again. So, my suggestion would be make this a more year-round usable space and still incorporate the outside, so.
And what I can say to that is this is still a very high-level schematic design. And as we were discussing at our meeting earlier today, we're only at about 10%.
Yeah.
right at this point. So that's great input, and that's something that we'll definitely look at as we go down the road and refine the design through the process. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
If I may?
Yep.
So first of all, I, having gone to the open house the other night and enjoyed that library for many years, there is no doubt that, that the library needs some serious work done to it. So I appreciate the team and all the work you and the team have put together to build this proposal and get it through the grant process. I guess I have two lines of questioning. My first one is around, as I think I'm on the Sustainable Westborough Committee, and my first line of question is really around what types of green technologies are going to be used in the building, and what would be the anticipation as far as fossil fuel consumption of the building?
Looking back at Eric again.
In your exercise tonight.
So we're proposing to eliminate the fossil fuel consumption of the building, to take out the gas-fired boilers and replace them with electric heat pumps and equipment that doesn't rely on fossil fuels, that can be used on with renewable sources of energy. We're looking at having a small photovoltaic array system on a portion of the roof that doesn't have equipment that would shade it or cause issues. We're also looking at a very high level of insulation values in the exterior walls and the roof, so that and exterior envelope windows and curtain wall, so that we're committed to working with the Sustainable Westborough. Pete Dunbeck is a member of the committee, the Library Building Committee now. We've also had some very preliminary meetings with National Grid Utility Company and Mass Save to look at their incentive rebate program. So we're looking at a very high level of efficiency in the building, all LED lighting throughout, and try and attain as high a level of efficiency and rebates back to the town as possible.
Terrific, thank you. My second part of questioning is around the contingency. As part of our packet, we got a spreadsheet which had some funding information, and there were two sets of contingencies that were listed in the I think, Maureen, you also mentioned $1.8 million in contingency. The spreadsheet, just on quick math, is about $1.5 million in contingency. So my first question about that is, what's different in between the $1.8 million you're talking about in your presentation and the $1.5 million that is roughly in the two sets of contingency between the owner's contingency on row 25G of the spreadsheet, and also the 40, where is it? Row 45 around, excuse me.
42.
42, the soft cost contingency. So I wanted to understand that difference. And then the second part of the question around the contingency is, how will that contingency be used? How will it be monitored? And thirdly, if the contingency is not utilized, will it be brought back to the general fund of the town?
Hi, John Lemieux from Vertex. Great questions. Start with the last one first.
Okay.
If the contingency, we view that as your money, and it's your money until the building committee approves it as a change to the project. Changes are either unexpected that come up or owner requests at the end of the day. Budget's going well, we should have thought a little bit more about adding a blank to the building. Hey, we've got the money in the contingency, should we do it? So contingency is, in my mind, is Westborough's money forever, and it's our job to watch that money for the duration. The difference between the 1.5 and the 1.8 is we updated the 1.5 to 1.8 because we had previously only included 5% on the hard costs of the job, the brick and mortar construction numbers. We then also added 5% for the soft costs as well. So there's, in general, that 1.8 represents really 5% across the whole project, both hard and soft costs. In the end, with a renovation, some of that second 5% may slide more towards the construction contingency, and you might spend a little less in the owner's contingency. In the end, we kind of view it all as one bucket, but we break it down into all those lines that you see, just so you can see the detail behind kind of how the sausage is made. Ultimately, we then present it in these 5 or 6 lines because it's much easier to digest and kind of follow what the difference was between 2016 to 2022.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then I just want to make sure I got a specific, if the contingency is not used, does that go back to general fund?
No,
We don't borrow.
no, because
it.
we just wouldn't, we borrow as we go, so if
Borrow.
we don't need the money, we wouldn't borrow it.
Okay.
Great.
So let me play that out a little bit. Bear with me for a moment. If in fact we need some contingency funding, halfway through the project for some reason, is the library committee going to have to come back to town meeting to appropriate that money? Because it's already been
So
approved.
the
for this
town
vote.
town meeting will approve the full borrowing authorization, and then they'll present some sort of schedule by which we'll borrow.
Okay, thank you.
Alan, any questions on your side? Can't see you. Can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I double-clicked instead of clicked. Quick question based on the new rendering drawings, which do look fabulous. Looking at the front of the library, it seems that the lawn is divided with a number of additional walkways. And I guess, the lawn in front of the library has become its own destination in many ways, for gathering, with the chairs, the turquoise table. I often go by and see people just sitting, visiting, maybe not part of a library program, maybe they're participating in a program. So I'm just wondering if we have enough actual lawn and grass in the front of the building, given the layout of the ramp and the stairs and things of that nature.
So one of the things that currently exists is that the slopes of the existing walkways are not compliant with the accessibility regulations. So that's one of the things that we've looked to comply with and revise those. In doing that, we also are looking at the condition of the trees along West Main Street. One of those is in severe decline and would not likely survive. So we were looking at some new landscaping there. We're also looking at revising along the lines of accessibility, compliance, and accessible route slopes, at revising the walkways in front of the building so that they don't come straight out from the entrance. They would come out to a point and then curve either way, and meet the West Main Street sidewalk in 2 locations.
But you are providing a new kind of outdoor patio area that's covered on the Parkman Street side.
We are. There's kind of a resting spot, if you will, along that ramp path that goes up to the main entry as well.
Is that where we're going to have music trivia next year? Or when this is done?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I want to make sure there's room for the baby goats, right? And the baby goat yoga, because that seems to be a popular program. But, I guess I know, there'll be more iterations of the design, and as you get into the details, I would just encourage in that design process to, maximize the availability of green space. Usable green space in front of the building along West Main.
Can I ask to that end, just a follow-on question to Alan's? I just don't know in terms of ADA requirements, are mechanical options an alternative for ramps? Or is one required to bring in ramps? So, rather than this long run of ramps, which are required by slope and all of that, could one have a mechanical option that would be much closer to the building and bring people in under a covered setting that would need that kind of facility? Because
There are other ways to do it without using a ramp. A ramp is you build it and then basically you're done. Obviously, you have to
Yep.
maintain it. You have to clear the snow and ice off it in the inclement weather. There are options for lifts. The accessibility regulations are somewhat stringent in what they allow you to use them on. If you're
Well, you don't actually have to answer that. I would
Yeah.
just ask you to consider that, to Alan's point about use of green space. And there are certainly, both in commercial and residential, lots of different options. And I'm sure, aesthetically, it could be protected, but it would have to be maintained. And there's always a trade-off there, you're getting into that. But we've seen, concrete breaks down too because of the weather. So, and it has to be shoveled and maintained and, swept and whatever else.
If I may follow on to Alan's question as well?
Sure. And then go back to Alan if you had more. I don't know if you did, but go ahead.
Yeah, just a real quick question on the trees. You made me think of this. There's actually several trees along that area of sidewalk between the library and the Congregational Church that are all in terrible condition. And I'm not sure how far off the setback off the street the town owns, but I would just look to, as you're designing the green aspects of the area, that I think we need to keep in mind that full 100 yards of sidewalk and make sure that we're tying in, with their trees and whatnot as well, and have an overall plan for that area.
Can I just ask a question? So I think you said that you're only at 10% design, and these are your conceptual drawings. Maybe it would be helpful to hear your plan for receiving input into the design, in addition to the site plan process.
Yeah, one of the things I was going to mention was we've been to the one-stop department head meeting. We began that process back in June, I think, and we've since followed up with different department heads, DPW, police, fire, building inspector. We anticipate going through the site plan review process with the town, so that triggers the design review board and other reviews, pretty comprehensive reviews of the design in general. So we will go through that process and look for approval through that means.
And so we'll be back, and since we have a
Right.
role in the site plan review, which I think is what you're
Right.
getting at, would have a chance in that piece too, as the site,
Yeah,
more
and I
definitive site plans come back.
Yeah, and I was just also asking if, just sort of given the public engagement that you've been doing, is there opportunity, or have you already received all the input and that's where this has come from?
No, we haven't. We were scheduled for the Commission on Disabilities meeting that unfortunately was canceled, so we're going in front of them. One of the things we'll be assuming this goes through the town meeting approval, we will be applying for a waiver to the Architectural Access Board to allow the continued use of the front entrance as is. And that, we feel we have a pretty good chance of having that approved, given the limitations. There's outside steps, but even once you get through those doors, there's more steps inside. So we think that will be allowed. We've had that approved in the past on similar buildings. But we would be looking for the Commission's support on that moving forward. We've also had some meetings with abutters, and we've met with the trustees of the church, and we'll continue those conversations moving as the design evolves further.
As trustees, we've been committed to transparency through this whole process, and so we've already held a bunch of public forums. We have a bunch scheduled up until town meeting, and we pledge to continue that throughout the whole process.
Yeah.
Alan, just back, did you have further questions, or were you?
Nope, my other questions have already been asked and answered. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, Sean.
Oh, sure. No, I just wanted to say, as a member of the Library Building Committee since last November, I think shortly after it formed again, the group has done a fantastic job. Representatives of the Library Board of Trustees, they have a lot of construction knowledge on the Library Building Committee. They've added Pete Dunbeck, to represent Sustainable, which was an excellent addition. And it's been a very deliberate process, I think, deciding to go with an owner's project manager and then going through a process and hiring Vertex, who has had a very successful job. It fails. The entire process over the last 10 months, I think, has been very deliberate, and it has brought us to this conclusion. I just want to say thank you to the entire committee. Well done.
Other questions? Okay. Your next piece.
Yes, if I can take just a couple more moments. I shared with Christy a letter that I had drafted. I've been working with the other waitlisted libraries to think about ways that we can fund our projects and help take the burden off taxpayers. A select board member in Deerfield wrote a letter this summer on behalf of all of the libraries that had been awarded grants to the governor and the lieutenant governor, requesting an additional $50 million be allocated from unspent ARPA funds to library construction, to municipalities, the 7 of us that were awarded, and Amherst, which was awarded in 2020. So they're getting the same types of cost increases that we are. He hasn't gotten a response yet, but we're coordinating an effort to reach out to our local state reps and our state senators as a group to try and work with them to get some of that funding either added to the supplemental budget that's being developed currently, or as an allocation from the additional unspent ARPA funds. I heard today that there's something like $2.2 billion of unspent COVID era ARPA funding at the state level, an additional $1.5 billion of unallocated budget surplus. So what we're asking for by asking for $50 million towards library construction is really literally a drop in the bucket. And we're hoping that if we all work together and make some noise, that it will result in some funding. Unfortunately, probably the earliest we would hear an answer on that would be what I heard today was sometime in October, which doesn't help any of the towns, including us, who have an October town meeting already scheduled for us to know for sure going into our town meeting whether we will or will not have additional ARPA funding. But our ask to our state reps and our state senator would be for a dollar amount that is the difference between our 2016 cost estimate and the new cost of the project, to cover the escalation and the inflation that has happened that is historic. And since the COVID funding was intended for infrastructure and to help municipalities deal with the effects of COVID, we felt that it's a perfectly appropriate and a fantastic way for them to spend money instead of giving it back to the federal government. So the letter I drafted kind of explains that, and we're all asking our select boards, our library trustees, and our building committees to sign on to that effort. And then hopefully you will do so. If you do, I will ask for you to sign the letter, and I will email it and postal mail it to our representatives and our senator. And we'll be working in the next few weeks to get the word out to voters, to any residents of our respective communities, to ask them to spread, to contact their elected officials to help bolster the cause. Because as we know from legislative efforts in the past, the more they hear from us, the more attention they're going to give to a project. So we're working on some plans of how we can make that happen.
So I think from our side, we did see that. It's in our packet, so really would just require a motion on our side to support that and sign on.
Make a motion to support the letter to our legislative delegation.
And second?
Okay, any comments or questions? I say no, I think it's great to put it out there and try to obtain additional funding. That would be a big win on this. for that
And
increase.
we're asking for the max that we think we need. We may not get it all, but if we got part of it, whatever we can do to lower the cost of this project, we will. And we intend to continue looking for other options like that as time goes on.
Perfect.
I would just ask that, again, not knowing what will happen in the election, although he's been involved, that Senator Eldridge also gets a copy of this.
He's on there.
Senator Moore.
Oh, Senator Moore,
He's not on the copy
neglected
I'm
to
looking
include
at.
his name, but I will include him as well.
Eldridge is, but Moore's not.
You said Eldridge.
Correct.
Oh, I'm sorry.
More.
Eldridge is currently, but as of November, he may not be. So I would just
Correct.
make sure
Yep.
that even the timing sounds variable, so minimally he should get a copy
Yeah.
at some point. Thank you. I didn't want to say as presented and then
Yep.
have him excluded. Thanks.
Okay, all those in favor, roll call. Allen?
Edinburgh, yes?
Welch, yes.
Johnson, yes?
Keo, yes.
Marshall, yes.
So we
Thank
will
you.
get that signed copy to you. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, because we moved around, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think we have gotten to everything on the agenda with the exception of issues and correspondence for the select board.
You're correct.
Is that correct? Okay, so let's jump into issues and correspondence. Alan, I'm going to go with you first.
I have nothing specific this week other than reminding folks if they have questions or have input or feedback on any of items before the select board to either come to our open forum or send us an email. It's great to know that people are talking about issues among themselves, but it's important if they want the select board to know what they're saying to make sure we all see that. And the best way is that selectboard@town.westborough.ma.us email address or coming in person to open forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Patrick?
Yeah, two things. As previously mentioned, I did attend the CMRPC infrastructure planning meeting earlier the other day. And I found it absolutely amazing to hear the conversations between the various different communities and the involvement that CMRPC has with the communities in regards to future planning of roads, transportation, electrical, gas, all the things you can think of that go into how, our streets operate, how our infrastructure all plays together. Very insightful conversation, great to learn from the audience and hear the questions the CMRPC has asked as they look to help our community move forward with all the challenges that we face, which, by the way, are not unique to us. I heard, from Shrewsbury and Northborough were both there, and it was very interesting to hear some of their insights, which jogged, I think, the memory of, mutual memories of the discussion. My second issue is around, this is National Suicide Awareness Month. And if you're interested, you can go to the Youth and Family Services office. They have cards available, which provide some additional information, and also will provide you a ribbon to recognize the month. So I encourage all to do that.
Thank you. Sean?
Nothing from me. Thank you.
Shelby?
Thank you. So I just want to follow up on a comment made by our town manager earlier. I want to thank the town and the various departments for supporting the Westborough for Life event. I want to thank select board members Welch and Keo for also attending. Appreciate you being there. I think that makes a difference to talk about the ways we can kind of be involved in civic engagement. And so thank you so much, because it was a Sunday and the Patriots were on.
My pleasure.
But the event was well attended, and feedback anecdotally at this point has been very positive. So thank you very much for that time and effort. I also want just follow on to Patrick's comments about the event that was hosted by CMRCP. That was a public event, probably not necessarily a lot of people knew about it because of just the nature of life. But the town continues to promote the opportunity for residents to provide input about those elements, infrastructure, transportation, I don't know, all of that. So the Imagine 2050 survey, and information is downstairs here in the lobby. You can also go to cmrcp.org and go click on Imagine 2050 and provide your input and your vision for this area. So I would encourage folks to check that out and provide feedback.
CMRPC.
Oh, did I say that? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
It's late.
It is late.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. I just had a couple things to remind folks, and do it again at our last meeting, but Arts in Common is coming up, scheduled for Saturday, October 1st. Always a great event, and you can see the banners up, and thanks to the DPW for hanging that, as we had had that request in there. The second thing, if folks have seen, but our annual Westborough Good Scout award or event dinner happening on, I think it's Wednesday, November 2nd. But the honorees this year are Superintendent Amber Bach and Karen Henderson, General Manager of Westborough TV. So I think two very deserving citizens. And when you look at the call it requirements or what we look for is in that Westborough Good Scout, it's they both exemplify that. So hopefully people know about that, and if they're interested in attending, they can go to mayflowerbsa.org and there'll be the event registrations there. But always a fun event, and just two great recipients being honored this year. So that is all that I had. Executive session.
Everything that's on, anything get removed?
Yeah, I think everything's, oh, something there. Oh, sorry.
Okay,
Yeah, we're all set.
we're doing all, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
All the way to the back, too.
yep. We move to executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, Fire Chief Patrick Purcell. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the following unions: DPW, Police Supervisors, Police Patrol. Under Mass General Law 30A, Section 21A3, with respect to litigation regarding residences of Westborough Station, Northland TPLP LLC at 100 Charlestown Meadows Drive, enforcement of affordable housing. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate at 0 Ruggles Street and 231 Turnpike Road. Under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to act under the authority of the Select Board to approve executive session minutes of August 9th, August 23rd, and September 6th of 2022.
And I declare, excuse me, that an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the board's bargaining and litigating position, and we will not be reconvening in open session at the conclusion of executive session. Can I have a second to the motion?
Second?
Okay, Board Member Edinburgh seconded. Roll call vote. Allen?
Edinburgh, yes?
Welch, yes.
Johnson, yes.
Keo, yes?
Marshall, yes.
And thank you to Aiden and Westborough TV. We are now going into executive session.